You actually have a chance for severe weather, a level 3 out of 5. That includes Cleveland and Syracuse, Pittsburgh and New York.
Understanding that initial agreement is over. Kuwait announcing it shot down Iranian missiles. No let up here.
Growing outrage in Maine. Hundreds congregated outside an ICE facility Friday, protesting the shooting death of a Colombian man earlier this week. 25-year-old Johann Sebastian Guerrero was stopped and ultimately shot and killed by an ICE agent, even though officials say he was not the intended target.
It seems apparent that these people, the ICE people, are not trained the way they should be, and we don't need them in Maine.
ABC's Alex Perchet. One potential source of the nasty stomach bug sickening thousands in the U.S. and 34 states has been traced to iceberg lettuce from central Mexico. That lettuce in shredded form is supplied by Taylor Farms to Taco Bell locations in 5 states. Michigan has the most cases, 5,000. You're listening to ABC News.
Now, Bloomberg Radio weather on Sirius XM 121.
Afternoon travel delays are a possibility to and from the Chicago area due to scattered showers and thunderstorms. The temperatures in Chicago near 90 this afternoon. Tampa, another spot where showers and thunderstorms may delay travelers. Temperatures in Tampa are going to be near 89 this afternoon. Watch for delays to and from Philadelphia due to scattered showers and thunderstorms this afternoon. Some of them may be strong. Temperatures near 87 in Philadelphia. Boston may have problems with late-day showers and storms. Temperatures in Boston, they're going to be up close to 85. If you're traveling to or from the Washington area, watch for showers and thunderstorms. Some could be quite strong. It's near 92 in Washington during the afternoon. Another area that may have problems with showers and thunderstorms would be Albany. Temperatures in Albany near 87. I'm Rob Carolyn, and that's your Bloomberg Travelers Forecast. Now back to the latest headlines from ABC News.
Lawmakers in Wisconsin calling for Elon Musk to be charged under the state's election bribery laws after he offered million-dollar payments to voters in last year's state Supreme Court election.
Despite Wisconsin's clear election bribery law, our state has never confronted a billionaire offering $1 million reward for participating in an election.
Green Bay State Rep Ahmad Rivera-Wagner said state elections administrators have referred Musk's case to prosecutors. 2 families accusing a North Dakota hospital of sending 2 babies home with the wrong families 38 years ago. And an at-home DNA test led Kyle Byland to a biological aunt in a genealogy platform.
There have certainly been different times throughout my life when I felt like a black sheep in my family, or that like maybe I was looking for some place that I belong.
Unity Medical Center in Grafton, North Dakota says it's investigating the Byland and Jeremy Morrison case. Tomorrow's the final of the World Cup in Rutherford, New Jersey. Spain and Argentina will square off, and it's the first time the top stars for each team will face each other too. ESPN senior writer Gab Marcotti.
Spain, very much a collective. This has been a World Cup of superstars, of Messi, of course, but also Mbappe, Haaland, and so on. Spain superstar Lamine Yamal, he's been a cog in a machine, a very effective machine.
Chuck Severson, ABC News.
And I'm Monica Ricks in the Bloomberg newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. U.S. stocks finished the week lower as semiconductor names dipped following the reveal of an artificial intelligence model from a Chinese startup and concerns around AI spending. The Philadelphia Stock Exchange Semiconductor Index fell, widening its drop to 20%, moving into a bear market. And the S&P 500 was down 1%, snapping 2 straight weeks of gains. The tech-heavy NASDAQ closed down 1.5%, its worst week in almost a month. Meta's in early talks to lease computing power from its data centers to Anthropic. Experts say it's an opportunity for the social media giant to build a new business around its heavy investment in AI infrastructure. There's also discussions happening between Apple and the Justice Department now to settle a 2024 antitrust case. We get more on that from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Sources tell Bloomberg the discussions are active. However, there is no guarantee that the two sides will reach an agreement. They say the iPhone maker has made multiple offers this year to the Justice Department to bring the case to a close. Meanwhile, Friday, Apple briefly topped NVIDIA to become the world's most valuable company, but NVIDIA regained the crown by the closing bell, ending just ahead of Apple in terms of market cap. Apple shares are now at a 52-week high and just below a record. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Mexico's ambassador to Washington, Roberto Lazari, says the high-stakes review of North America's Free Trade Pact should be completed later this year. But he emphasized that the U.S., Mexico, and Canada need to accelerate trade talks to give investors more certainty and preserve the region's competitive advantages. He says any delay getting to a deal could amount to an economic hit. And rising living costs are making it tougher now to save for retirement. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager tells us that's the finding of 3 reports out this week.
A survey from NFP finds 46% of working adults are deprioritizing or just not saving because they've got to take care of housing, car payments, or health care first. 27% of respondents to a Schroeder survey say they've cut back or even borrowed from workplace retirement accounts to take care of loans or other emergency payments. And a Thrivent survey shows almost 2 in 3 non-retirees are focused on their current personal finances rather than retirement. Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Monica Ricks, and this is Bloomberg.
Thursday, it's a Bloomberg News exclusive.
The United Nations is crucial. It's a world of fragmentation, it's a world of tension.
For the first time in 10 years, the United Nations is set for a leadership change.
Trust in the organization is waning.
The candidates for Secretary General debate live from UN headquarters.
We are stronger when we stand together.
UN Town Hall, the next Secretary General. Thursday afternoon at 5 Eastern. Only on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app.
This is Bloomberg Business Week Daily, reporting from the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead, with insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy, plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week Daily with Carol Masser and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the weekend edition of Bloomberg Business Week. A high-stakes week both globally and up on Capitol Hill. In the Middle East, first of all, the fragile June ceasefire between the United States and Iran hit a major roadblock following a heavy new wave of U.S. airstrikes on Iran. The strikes are part of a bombing campaign that President Donald Trump says will continue until Iran stops attacking ships in the Strait of Hormuz and agrees to open the waterway. A developing story big time as we wrapped up. We should point out there were strikes kind of going on all around the region. It was just not working out as everyone expected. And gotta also mention all the big Wall Street banks reported earnings, and let's just say there were lots of superlatives when it came to many of the results. For the latest on that and the ongoing U.S. war in Iran, head over to the Bloomberg and to Bloomberg.com.
Also a focus this past week, newish Fed Chair Kevin Warsh making a highly anticipated debut on Capitol Hill. He faced tough questions from lawmakers when it came to inflation, monetary policy, the economic impact of AI, and more. Meanwhile, on Wall Street, chip stocks had quite a week, riding a roller coaster of sharp sell-offs, followed by a strong tech rebound. Ups and downs, roller coaster, I think, is the right way to describe it.
It is. And this hour, we keep an eye on those chips, plus chocolate and Barbie. It's all in the 10 stocks to watch this quarter, thanks to our Bloomberg Intelligence team, who have identified the most interesting companies from their group of what they call high-confidence focus ideas. We reveal the names and why, for better or for worse, they bear watching.
Then we turn our attention to the rapidly expanding world of prediction markets. We sit down with Udesh Jha. He's the chief risk officer over at Kalshi, on the company's latest tool that plots the future price of computing power.
Plus, as the summer heat continues to break records, we address a hotly debated question in the modern corporate world. Is it ever okay to show some leg in the office? We're talking about, I feel like, mostly for guys here.
I'm wearing shorts right now, so
I know you are.
That's the answer.
Women can kind of get away with lots of things of showing legs regularly, but I don't know. With guys in shorts, I guess it's a whole other thing. Bloomberg Pursuit's editor-at-large, Chris Rauser, says, yes, it's okay to show a little leg for men. He'll explain a little later on.
All that to come. We begin with the 10 companies to watch this quarter. Our Bloomberg Intelligence team has identified interesting companies from its roster of high-confidence focus ideas. It spans sectors and regions. Each scenario outlines a catalyst in the next few months that supports their case.
Some of the companies highlight high stakes in semiconductor chips, the pricing power of global chocolate, and the next chapter for Barbie. Helping us break it all down is Tim Craighead, Bloomberg Intelligence Global Chief Content Officer. He joined me alongside Bloomberg News credit reporter Emily Grafeo.
So these companies are all part of a broader group of ideas that we have on an ongoing basis, an actively managed group of ideas we call focus ideas. You can find them on the terminal, by the way, with BI Focus. But the crux of these is that they're high conviction fundamental views, either positive or cautious, from the analysts across the globe. They span all sectors. And they're differentiated from what the market seems to be discounting. And high conviction, differentiated. The third leg of this is there's catalyst ahead that we think will change the market's mentality. And with this group of 10, it is whittled way down. These are 10 across the globe, positive and negative, across sectors, that we think have particularly notable catalysts coming up in the third quarter. So it's not the be all and end all, but it's certainly a high profile topical list of 10 companies to watch.
Okay, well, we have to start with Microsoft. That's the largest company on the list here. What is the market getting wrong about Microsoft? And I love how the story is laid out, because you have a picture, you have a data sheet, and then you also have a trigger, which is a note about, what could trigger any movement. But I'll let you explain it.
Yeah. So the crux of the idea with Microsoft is the market seems to have put Microsoft in the bucket of broad software that could be disrupted by AI. There's that theme of the SaaS apocalypse, where AI is going to take over everything that's software. It seems to be forgetting that Microsoft is one of the large hyperscalers. It has, through its ongoing work, arguably the leading cloud platform for large language models. And they also have a new Microsoft 360 Office suite that's coming out in the second half. We think revenue is set to surprise on the upside, and the market seems to be discounting quite the opposite.
I get it. I feel like we've been talking about Microsoft and watching it a lot, so I can see why you guys included that in the list. Where shall we go next? What's a name that maybe either surprised you or you think that you find of interest?
Well, I think one way to think about this, the last couple of times we've had conversations, there's been AI-related ideas. We've talked about some of the big chip companies before. We've talked about other hyperscalers. But we're always looking for the undiscovered AI plays, or the second derivative, if you will. And there's two on the list this time that I think fit that bill. One is a UK company called Halma, which is, it falls in the industrial category. They do a lot of health and safety equipment. But they've got a business embedded in their divisions that makes photonics. Photonics are an optical device that essentially helps replace copper into data center infrastructure to reduce legacy, increase bandwidth, speed, etc. And it's a big business. It's ramping aggressively. They are the supplier for one of the big hyperscalers. And we don't think that it's baked in to what the market thinks. Second one is Telecom Malaysia. You think about Asia building out AI, a lot of the data center build out has been in Singapore. They're running out of space. It is space constrained. More and more data center build out is moving across the channel into southern Malaysia, and Telecom Malaysia is the digital infrastructure provider. So they're providing, fiber backhaul and other services that will allow this data center build out. So two interesting sort of second derivative plays on the AI theme.
And what about Solar Edge? I know that's a company on the list where the outlook was a cloud. Again, to those just listening, this list, the outlook is either a cloud or a sun. Sorry, Solar Edge has a sun. Yes. Is that not, does AI not play into that thesis? Wouldn't they get a boost from, energy demands?
It does, and it doesn't. It does in that there is no doubt that solar and other renewable energy sources are going to play into data center energy demand. And, there's a great story to be told along those lines. That said, the real reason why we're focused on SolarEdge at this point is actually the European business. And that's not so much an AI-driven issue. It's energy security. We've been through the story of Russia invading Ukraine and disrupting the gas supply. We've now been through the story of the Middle East conflict disrupting gas supply. Europe has been twice bitten and is thinking very actively about how to do more in terms of driving energy security. Solar is one of those elements. And SolarEdge has seen its European business, which is about 30% of revenue, accelerate. And we think that has further legs. Long legs.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like, Craig, keep having these conversations coming off the U.S. war in Iran, that there are countries, whether it's China, as we are talking about, and other places, that don't want to be so vulnerable when it comes to global energy supplies, like brought to their need. And China in particular, I think, is certainly looking at that. This is a stock, though, that's been on a tear, up almost 100% year to date, although about 18% of the float is short. So you get a little bit of feel in terms of what the street is thinking. I got to go to Mattel. We talked Barbie. Let's go there. They were on fire, and then they weren't.
Well, enough is enough, right? So sorry.
No.
Had to go. Had to throw that in sometime. Mattel, has a big business in the doll business. It's a big chunk of that is Barbie. And it did get a big boost by the Barbie movie back a couple of years ago. But the toy business has been moving, at least from our analysts' perspective, more towards building sets and in particular trading cards more recently. The sort of focus is off of the dolls. And with that in mind, we think that they're set for further disappointment in terms of expected revenue growth. It's really as simple as that. It's a product cycle sort of story, and the product cycle is right now not in their favor.
All right, you got to finish up with what? What's the matter?
I just feel bad for Barbie. Maybe they could have her build something like Barbie the Builder, and then
maybe she could build data centers.
Yeah,
like an AI play or something.
Sorry, Carol, go ahead.
I don't know. It's that lame, but hey, Barbie can do anything. We know that. I got to end up with chocolate. Got about a minute left here. Not a name that I'm that familiar with, but I love me some good dark chocolate. Just gonna say.
So Barry Callebaut is a European cocoa producer. And so they source cocoa, they process it, they sell it to the big chocolate makers, Nestle and others. A couple of things have been going on in the chocolate business. Number one, after cocoa spiked over the course of the last couple of years because of harvest issues, weather, what have you, chocolate makers have been actually reducing the content of chocolate, of cocoa in their chocolate, which is a negative on a structural basis for Barry Callebaut we don't think is fully understood. You layer on top of that El Nino, which is increasingly looking to be more severe, and that could disrupt supply, which increases the cost of cocoa beans, which causes a cost squeeze for Barry Callebaut. And you end up, therefore, with a volume pressure, a cost pressure, and they're kind of stuck in the middle. And we think that disappointment is ahead.
All right, that makes sense.
So it's not very sweet on that one, but you can get a chocolate bar.
That was Tim Craighead, Bloomberg Intelligence Global Chief Content Officer. Check out the full list online at Bloomberg.com/businessweek and on the Bloomberg Terminal. Our thanks too to Emily Grafeo, Bloomberg News credit reporter. She filled in while I was away.
Still ahead on Bloomberg Business Week, we know about trading AI tech stocks, but how about trading the computing power behind them?
Kalshi ramps up its effort to build markets for just that. We check in with its chief risk officer next. This is Bloomberg.
And I'm Monica Ricks in the Bloomberg newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. Iran says it's suspending its commitments under an interim peace deal and unleashed heavy attacks on Gulf neighbors in retaliation for the latest round of U.S. strikes aimed at Tehran's military capabilities and infrastructure. Bloomberg national security reporter Courtney McBride has the latest.
We are seeing tit-for-tat strikes between the U.S. and Iran, and we're not quite at the point of an escalation to or return to full-scale conflict, but we certainly are seeing more damage and expansion of targets by the U.S., both geographically and in terms of the types of sites that are being hit.
Kuwait suffered one of the heaviest barrages overnight since the conflict started, including hits to its airport and an oil facility. Here at home, millions are muddling through more unhealthy air from uncontrolled wildfires in Canada. Bloomberg's Emily Forgash is covering this and says conditions seem to be improving.
It has gotten a bit better today and will keep getting better through the day. We expect some rain in New York today. That should help. And yeah, the World Cup match seems to be happening tomorrow, although that can always change.
Emily Forgash on Bloomberg This Weekend. FIFA says it's monitoring the situation but doesn't expect the final to be impacted. Federal health officials have identified lettuce from Mexico served by Taco Bell locations across 5 states as a source of that stomach-churning parasite, Psychospora. The USDA is also looking into Taylor Farms products, including their salad kits, which have been linked to the outbreak. Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin has promised an aggressive attack against voter fraud ahead of midterms.
If you are an illegal or you're voting illegally, we will hunt you down. We will find you, and we will prosecute you.
Mullen also threatened state elections officials with fines and possible prison time if they don't hand over sensitive voter data. The threat follows President Trump's primetime address this week, reviving unsubstantiated claims about the 2020 election. And 2 U.S. service workers are safe and free now after being held hostage for hours yesterday in a forest in Northern California. The suspect reportedly zip-tied and held them at gunpoint in a trailer before drones tracked them down and authorities arrested the man. 49-year-old Joseph Henriksen now faces federal kidnapping charges. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Monica Ricks, and this is Bloomberg.
Hi, I'm Tom Keene, inviting you to join me for the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. It's about making you smarter every business day.
I'm Paul Sweeney. We bring you complete coverage of stocks, bonds, commodities, even crypto. All the information you need to excel in the markets.
And I'm Alexis Christoforous. Listen to us for essential conversations with the smartest names in economics, finance, investment, and international relations.
That's the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Subscribe today on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you listen.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest edition of the Bloomberg Daybreak U.S. Edition podcast, we got reaction to President Trump's primetime speech on election interference from Jennifer Lawless, professor of politics at the University of Virginia.
My reaction to the speech was that it was a lot of nothing and no new information. It's the same kinds of broad, vague claims that we've been hearing since the 2020 election. And to do it during prime time is dangerous, and it really sows a lot of doubt into the election system.
Now, he did say that there is newly declassified intelligence findings of Chinese interference, 200,000 fraudulent voters, non-citizens on state voter rolls. As you say, those are claims he's made before. Why does the evidence not seem like enough to you?
Well, I think there are a couple of things going on here. The first is that even if those things are true, and we know that there was Chinese interference, at least in terms of trying to undermine democracy in previous elections, that doesn't mean that they succeeded. And I think what Donald Trump does is he looks at intelligence as though it's the final story. It's the verdict when it's not. It's just information that elected officials and analysts need to use to assess where we are as a country. The second reason is that there's no evidence that any kind of interference or lists of people on voter rolls led to any change in outcome. There may be people on voter rolls who should not be there, but there's no evidence that they actually voted. There may have been interference in U.S. elections or attempts to interfere, but that doesn't mean that any foreign power affected the outcome.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Bloomberg Daybreak U.S. Edition podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
This is Bloomberg Business Week Daily with Carol Masser and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
So remember back in May, I don't know if you remember this, it was at the Milken Institute, their global conference in Beverly Hills.
If you weren't watching our show, if you don't remember this,
because it was on.
It was on.
BlackRock CEO Larry Fink said global demand for computing power is so huge that traders will one day be able to bet on a futures market for it. Here's a refresher in case you missed it or forgot about it.
The United States is short power, we're short compute, we're short chips, and there are going to be shortages in all three. And memory, four things. I actually believe a new asset class will be buying futures of compute. We just don't have enough compute power right now.
And that was BlackRock's Larry Fink at Milken back in May. Well, Larry's prediction might just be coming true. Kalshi has created a tool that plots the future price of computing power, joining the ranks of exchange and index operators attempting to build markets around the commodity powering artificial intelligence.
Joining us now with more in a Bloomberg exclusive, Udesh Jha, Chief Risk Officer of the prediction market Kalshi, joining us from London. Also with us, Bloomberg News finance reporter Kat Doherty here in the studio. Udesh, you were just appointed to this position coming from the derivatives marketplace CME Group. You spent 16 years at CME. You posted on LinkedIn that you started paying attention to Kalshi back in 2024 during the elections. What struck you then, and why at the end of the post you say, "I've never felt this energized in a long time." What struck you about this company?
I think as you said, I've been at CME. I was at CME for 16 years. I joined CME at the onset of the Dodd-Frank post-clearing mandates. And now, looking ahead 16 years, I think I see the same excitement in the financial industry with prediction markets, with the migration to tokens, with cloud adoption. And from that standpoint, I think Kalshi, at the center of a lot of that innovation, is a really exciting place. And I'm super excited to be joining at this part of the journey with them.
So, Udesh, many people know Kalshi for event contracts, betting on the likelihood of, let's say, a FIFA game and who's going to be the World Cup winner. You've launched a number of new products outside of event contracts. Can you talk about some of the recent initiatives and why you're moving away from or adding to event contracts?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think as we have seen, event contracts or prediction markets are becoming quite mainstream. For a few reasons. One is the predictive power that they provide, the very specific questions that they ask, which help the institutions, retail, and other participants manage risk. And today we are at Kalshi. We have about a very large set of institutional and direct retail participants who are able to do so. And with that in mind, we have seen a fairly large growth in some of the very important asset classes, such as crypto, such as KPI markets. And now I'm excited to talk today about the compute market, which is GPU related, that we are excited to also bring in to the marketplace for risk management and other needs.
And we want to dig into this. Just two quick questions. Is BlackRock involved?
Right now, at this point in time, this is something that we have done organically. We do have pricing information that comes from one of our partner vendors that's available on our website. But we do expect large institutions to take advantage of this innovation by you looking at the forward curves and use it to price deals, to do OTC contracts, to do other sorts of derivatives for their purposes.
And I know it's early. Are people calling you already because they're interested in terms of various institutions or institutional investors?
Yes, we are. We are getting a lot of inbounds because we are filling a void in this marketplace, which was very important. If you're Bloomberg, for example, is very big in the swaps market, as you know, for pricing interest rate swaps or any other derivative or any other deal that depends. Forward curve is very important. It is extremely valuable for anybody doing a 5-year swap or a 2-year swap to know what would be the rate on a particular index out there. Right? And that's precisely what we have done. We know that eventually this market is going to become quite large. Some estimates of the total addressable market size are in trillions. If you look at the amount of funding committed by the hyperscalers, they are north of 500 to 600 billion just for 2026. And if you look at multiples beyond that, what this market could be, it's a very large market. So we are getting a lot of inbound, but we do want to start first with a natural requirement, which is to bring price discovery in the marketplace so that it can be used for hedging, trading, and other purposes down the line.
So CME Group said back in May that it would launch computing power futures linked to an index compiled by Silicon Data. Intercontinental Exchange, it owns the New York Stock Exchange, and I'm reading right from Kat's article here, teaming up with the financial infrastructure firm Orn to add futures contracts for computing power. Why are you better positioned to build this tool than they are?
I think I would start by saying that by such CME and ICE and others, it actually lends a lot of credence to the marketplace, to the demand for this asset class, in addition to what Larry Fink said earlier. But prediction markets are unique for a few reasons. One, the compute or the GPU market is not standardized at this point in time. There are many different factors that play into that index. It could be locations, the chips, the different kinds of chips, the grades, the different uses. So rather than focusing on a particular index or a particular contract, the prediction market allows us to list several of these contracts, which is what we have done. And the prediction market also ensures very robust price discovery at much lower levels of total open interest that we have seen through many of other contracts. So this is where it is very uniquely positioned to bring in a more accurate price discovery than focusing on one or two different grades of the marketplace and do a traditional future.
So
eventually,
Udesh,
sorry, go ahead.
You're mentioning an issue that has been raised in terms of this is a nascent asset class. It is a market that is evolving. We have a number of exchanges, as Tim mentions, that have gotten into the compute market and trying to develop it. Why is this price discovery that you're talking about, do you find it to be a more accurate indicator of where compute prices are at this moment, and then with this forward curve, where they are indicated at a future point in time?
Yeah, I think one of the unique aspects of our price discovery that it's market driven. There are some forward curves out there, but they are derived not out of market inputs, but through either OTC deals or other bilateral contracts. But ours is a true market driven, and that is where the power of the wisdom of the crowd of the marketplace and the accuracy that comes out of it comes to full form. And that's why it's unique and the first in its category.
And who do you see as your core users for this product?
We do expect to see a variety of users. I think on one side, you have the natural sellers of compute, hyperscalers. You can have the neo cloud providers. On the other side, there are the users of compute, AI inference companies, medical research companies coming up with which have significant computing needs to do drugs research, retail, many of which were interested or are speculators in the marketplace. So we do feel this, just like many other commodities, to have a breadth of producers or suppliers and demand that will propel this ecosystem or the marketplace.
Udesh, I want to try to understand some of the nuance in this and how you account for the nuance. Maybe it's algorithmically. I'm just curious from you. In this release, Tarek Mansour, the company's founder, CEO, says that compute is the new oil. Compute futures will eventually dwarf oil futures. Oil, though, is fungible. It's a barrel of Brent is a barrel of Brent. It kind of doesn't matter. An hour, though, on an H200 is not the same as an hour on a B200. Chips depreciate. New architecture arrives every 12 to 18 months. Pricing power shifts. How do you build a reliable forward curve on a commodity that kind of like as soon as, it's like a new car, it becomes obsolete or it depreciates, as soon as you drive it off the lot?
And that's a very, very important point that you make, Tim. I think, as I mentioned earlier, this marketplace is still finding its footing. There are several grades, there are several different tenors, several different other categories that give the appearance that it is quite dispersed. I would like to say that even in the oil market, there are many different grades. There is the WTI Cushing grade, there is the WTI, but there are various forms of WTI. But the marketplace has gravitated and formed a representative index, which is good for the market, and then there are basis products that derive. So we expect the marketplace to gravitate towards that, and the prediction markets and our forward curve to be a good enabler, so that that markets, our users can see the price on different grades of GPU compute at different tenors. And then the market will most likely gravitate towards a limited set of usable indices.
Udesh, I wanted to ask, so we have this forward product that you have just released, but the intention moving forward, could you and do you plan to release other products that are investable products on top of this forward curve?
Yes, I think the forward curve is sort of your foundation to do other products, such as futures, such as swaps, such as any other derivatives. So we'll see where the demand takes us. But I think our focus in the very immediate term is to build liquidity on the markets that are driving this forward curve, so that this becomes the anchor or the benchmark for the industry.
So one of the things I'm curious about is, and follow me for a second if you can, like who actually trades this in the first year? And I bring it up because the buyers who need it this most, we're talking about the AI startups using millions of compute for training, right? There's that, are also the ones least able to post margin and kind of manage derivatives risk. The sellers, the hyperscalers, whether it's AWS, whether it's Google Cloud, they have already in many ways locked in capacity through those long-term contracts. We talk about it a lot here at Bloomberg. They have no obvious incentive to essentially give up some of that pricing power to an exchange. So Udesh, who do you see as using this in the first year, if you will? And what happens if liquidity is too thin, so thin to produce a meaningful price signal, which is so important to really a truly functional marketplace?
You're very right. I think there is a lot of capacity that the hyperscalers have already committed to. But we are also seeing an astronomical speed at which the demand is growing over the last 6 months, or even a year if you look back. The adoption of compute that are heavily dependent on AI and others have been growing on quite. So there are going to be quite a few on the demand side that will emerge, whether it's financial institutions or drug research institutions or neoclouds lending them. So we do expect, and then retail, of course, for an asset class which is as exciting and potentially volatile. I think we will see retail and other speculative power come in as well. And I do expect hyperscalers to, at some point in time, do look at this market as well.
That was Udesh Jha, Chief Risk Officer at Kalshi. Our thanks as well to Kat Doherty, Bloomberg News finance reporter. Now, a couple days after our interview, Kalshi announced it's expanding into biotech by offering wagers on the outcomes of clinical trials. Also, it's getting into predicting flight delays, too.
Sounds like everything it's getting into, so stay tuned. Hey, still ahead on Bloomberg Business Week, to wear or not to wear shorts. We debate the ultimate summer corporate workplace battle.
That's with the shorts wearing Chris Rouser. This is Bloomberg.
This is your 24-hour source for world markets and breaking business news. Bloomberg Radio. Coming up, the latest market-moving headlines from Bloomberg. First, an update from our partners at ABC News.
ABC News, I'm Chuck Severson. Winds carrying smoke from hundreds of wildfires in Minnesota and Canada across more than a dozen states, creating hazardous air conditions. Kevin Wilson's in New York City, where the National Guard was giving out masks at transit hubs.
A little bit scary, a little dangerous. I didn't know the smoke could come so far from Canada.
Some people are getting relief from the smoke, but at a cost because of the potential for bad storms with flash flood watches and possible tornadoes. Sirens in Kuwait City, the U.S. and Iran exchanging more air attacks as Iran declares the memorandum of understanding, that initial agreement, is over. Kuwait announcing it shot down Iranian missiles. One potential source of the stomach bug sickening thousands in the U.S. and 34 states has been traced by the FDA to iceberg lettuce from central Mexico. That lettuce, in shredded form, is supplied by Taylor Farms to Taco Bell locations in 5 states. This is ABC News.
And I'm Monica Ricks in the Bloomberg newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. A losing week for the S&P 500 with chip stocks moving into a bear market. Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet has details.
Stocks finished the week lower. Semis dipped following the reveal of an AI model from a Chinese startup. The S&P 500 index was down 1.5% on the week, snapping 2 straight weeks of gains. The Dow fell for a second week, down 0.9%. NASDAQ this week down 2.9%. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
SpaceX shares also tumbled Friday, erasing more than $1 trillion in market value from the rocket and artificial intelligence giant's all-time high. The stock fell 5.4%, giving the company a market value of $1.63 trillion. The value stood at $2.6 trillion in its third day of trading last month. The Trump administration is considering plans for an independent regulator to vet the safety of artificial intelligence models. We get more on that from Bloomberg's Ed Kalegi.
It comes after Silicon Valley leaders complained about the ad hoc nature of recent U.S. moves to slow the release of cutting-edge AI systems. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent helped develop the proposal, which would create an independent regulatory agency for AI that would report to the Securities and Exchange Commission, similar to the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. The plan is now being reviewed by White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. Ed Kalegi, Bloomberg Radio.
Apple's in talks to settle a 2024 lawsuit with the Justice Department that claims the iPhone maker violated antitrust laws. The DOJ accused Apple of monopolizing the market for high-end smartphones, in part by blocking so-called super apps and discouraging outside messaging solutions. So far, the two sides have reportedly exchanged draft settlement materials, but there's no guarantee they'll reach an agreement. A small protest was held outside the federal courthouse in Oakland, California yesterday as a judge was set to hold a hearing for 12 states suing to block Paramount Skydance's proposed merger with Warner Brothers Discovery. Comedian and CNN host W. Kamau Bell.
I value journalistic independence. I also value the fact that we live in a time where the more media consolidation we have, the less choices we have.
Paramount says the lawsuit distorts settled antitrust law and misrepresents competition in the entertainment industry. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Monica Ricks, and this is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Surveillance, your home for insight on international relations. With guests like Robert Hormats of Kissinger Associates.
China is a peer competitor, unlike any we have seen.
Lindsay Newman, Associate Fellow at Chatham House.
Iran remains a bit of a black box.
And Tina Fordham of Fordham Global Foresight.
Ukraine is emerging as Europe's military superpower.
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Originals, and the Bloomberg Business app.
A new chapter in global growth is being written, and much of it is happening in Africa.
Africans need to invest.
There are deals to be done and business to be won.
I'm Jennifer Zabasaja. Every week on the Next Africa podcast, we track capital flows and political shifts shaping the continent's future.
The digitalization of Africa is going to power its growth.
Ridding the world of something like HIV is possible.
Population growth is so enormous in Africa.
Listen to Next Africa on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Take your Bloomberg Radio listening experience to the next level. Download the Bloomberg Business app today and listen on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Get live radio, podcasts, and on-demand news updates no matter where you are, from coast to coast and across the globe. Plus, expanded details on your favorite shows at the click of a button. The Bloomberg Business app, now on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Download it free in the Apple App Store or on Google Play. Bloomberg Radio. Context changes everything.
The future of entertainment is happening now. Join Bloomberg Screen Time in Los Angeles, where the leaders of film, streaming, music, sports, gaming, and technology come together to discuss what's next. Hear from the executives, creators, investors, and innovators shaping the future of content, culture, and creativity. Bloomberg Screen Time, September 30th through October 1st, where creators and capital connect. Request your invitation today. BloombergLive.com/screentime/radio.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Added protein seems to be in just about every grocery aisle item these days, and drinks packed with protein are gaining in popularity.
It's growing at about a mid-single-digit rate.
Bloomberg senior industry analyst Ken Shea says protein drinks are a multi-billion-dollar business.
It's about an $8.5 billion market in the U.S.
Shea says Coca-Cola dominates the protein drink category with its Core Power and Fairlife brands, followed by Bellring with its Premier and Dymatize labels, and then Abbott Labs, which owns Ensure. One major driver of increased sales is rising demand from people using GLP-1 drugs.
Tends to diminish, your muscle And so a lot of users are drinking it on that basis.
But as popular as protein drinks are, they still don't pack the market muscle that other soft drinks do.
The star right now is energy drinks. That's growing at a double-digit rate, and it's hard for everybody to keep up with them.
Just behind energy drinks in popularity are sports drinks, followed by carbonated beverages. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest Balance of Power podcast, we talk with Elon Goldenberg from J Street as the U.S. escalates the war with Iran.
We are really back to the beginning in many ways. What I argued for, and I did spend years looking at different scenarios and planning for these possibilities at the Pentagon. And when we really looked at what happens at the end of a war with Iran or how it goes, our most central conclusion was essentially this ends up looking a lot like the first Iraq war, going back to the early 1990s, where at the end of it, you're going to have a wounded regime, but it's still there. In some ways, it's weaker, but in many other ways, it's angrier. And then you're just in a new normal where you have instability and bouts of violence, and a war starts every few weeks, or small wars, and maybe it's not full war. Just this is the new normal. And that's absolutely what we're doing. But actually, the one thing I'll say is it's actually a lot worse than what I'd even predicted, because the one big difference is Iran has a lot more leverage over the Strait of Hormuz and has been able to grab that leverage as a result of this war that none of us really anticipated was going to be as effective. We thought they'd be able to try and close it and use it as a tool, but their ability to sustain that leverage and control of it over time has really been a wild card and has made things even worse. So I thought this was a terrible idea from the start. That's what I wrote at the very beginning of the war for precisely these reasons, that there's no positive way to end this in a way that works for the United States. But it really has turned out to be even worse than I thought it would be.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Balance of Power podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
This is Bloomberg Business Week Daily with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, hopefully there was a little bit of a debate, like when we were talking about doing this on the show today, there's like sort of a divide between who knows this ad and this song versus who doesn't. I think the three of us sitting here know this.
Yes.
Are familiar with this.
Taking you back to the 70s.
Or just like it's kind of legendary.
It is legendary.
Yeah.
Like it's, being culturally literate.
So we're talking about shorts in the office.
We are.
And here's what I've started doing over the past few years, as you guys know. I wear shorts on my commute because it's like tomorrow's going to be 97 degrees.
Absolutely.
I walk miles dropping these kids off at camp or school or whatever. I sweat a lot in this humidity, and then I get into the office and I basically run from the elevators, trying to avoid everybody, and go and change into actual work clothes.
Yeah.
Chris Rouser is not the same. He wears shorts into the office, and he wears them proudly.
He looks great.
Oh, and you can actually see them if you're watching this on YouTube or Bloomberg Originals.
Yeah.
The shorts are nice, though. They're ironed.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they're pleated.
I don't sprint to my desk. I prance. I strut. I am proud of wearing shorts.
There's a list of about a dozen people in this building who I do not want to see between when I'm wearing those shorts and when I'm changed into
Yes, I have seen some of those people.
That voice you hear is Chris Rouser. He's editor-at-large for Bloomberg Pursuits. He's probably the only person who can write 2,000 words about shorts and wearing them or not to the office. Mm-hmm. And I think, Chris, it's actually an important story for our time. We're going to talk to Mark Gongloff in a few minutes about heat and weather and sort of what we're going through here in the U.S. and in Europe, this summer. But the conversation is particularly relevant right now.
Mm-hmm. It's very important. Thank you for paying attention to this very important subject.
We do.
So you get into the history a little bit in the piece, but why are shorts having a moment?
Well, shorts are having a moment on runways, on streets because it's so hot, and a little bit in offices. I have been on a warpath for a couple of years now where my rule is if it's 90 degrees or higher, you get to wear shorts to work. Now, I know I'm wrong. We did a poll. We did a poll of Bloomberg users, and only 45% of people thought it was appropriate to wear shorts to work. And many of them left comments like, yes, of course, if you work in a surf shop. One person said, AI is taking all our humanity. All we have left is pants. So this is an unpopular stance, but the world is changing. France recorded its hottest temperature ever 2 weeks ago.
And there's no air over there, right?
Yep.
AC.
The tube in London is like a hell pipe, like it's just truly miserable. Why can't we wear clothes that recognize that we have actual bodies that exist in an actual world?
Yeah.
I ask you.
What's wrong with that? Tell us what's going on too in Japan. Didn't they kind of come out, I think the governor, and declare that male municipal workers were allowed to wear shorts to work?
Yeah, so Japan and Tokyo has had this initiative, Tokyo Cool Biz, since like the mid-aughts, which was basically like, we don't need to be so dressed up. We can relax with some of our codes. And then this year, they went as far as to say in April, okay, you can actually wear shorts to work because for saving money on air conditioning costs, it just was like an actual civic duty. You should wear shorts. And that's a very formal culture, much more formal than we are. Yeah,
exactly.
It's funny in your piece, you quote people, some of them are investors that people have heard of, like Bill Ackman, some are prominent doctors, real estate brokers who are touring multi-million-dollar homes, partners at prominent law firms.
Yes.
Every single one of them was like, do not wear shorts.
Correct.
In fact, the partner of the law firm said 3-piece suit, tie, and dress shoes that are made of leather, that are black or brown, no sneakers.
Yes, correct. That person also recognizes that he is on the more formal edge of the spectrum. He said no backpacks except if you're an intern. But yeah, most people feel like it's not okay. A lot of people I spoke to, like that real estate agent, like this interior designer, even people who are not in strictly formal offices, if they've ever been shamed or yelled at by someone, which a lot of us have, including me in this office, like, it sticks with you, and you're like, okay, my behavior code is set by somebody disapproving of me, and then it sticks with me for the rest of my career.
Wait, was Bill Ackman talking about giving up short selling, or was he talking
he's already given up short selling.
Okay, but he doesn't wear shorts either.
I asked him about shorts, and he said, no, I don't.
But he does play tennis, and he wears shorts when he plays tennis.
Yes, but not in the office.
All right. Yeah. Well, I love this, but it wasn't always so. Before the 19th century in the West, as you write, displaying the body was central to displaying masculinity, specifically showing some leg.
Oh, yeah. Like men in courtly situations, they wore culottes, or they wore
kilts,
breeches, and then they wore stockings. Oh, yeah, kilts, of course.
Right.
And like when in the painting John Trumbull did of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, John Adams is showing his calves. Like, if he can do it, you can in your next RFP talking about your KPIs, I swear.
No, it's really true. Like, what happened? Is it just because, you get into, I really love like industrialization, suits becoming cheaper, like people could afford more,
showing that you're not a laborer.
Right.
Exactly. That you're not working in you're actually working in an office. It's a class thing.
You guys see how easy it is to write 2,000 words about this stuff.
We are blown away.
It used to be like wearing clothes that recognized that you lived in a world and used your body was like for poor people. It was like only serfs did that. Courtly people wore corsets. They wore really restrictive clothing that was like almost you couldn't move in at all, and pretended that you weren't in like a boiling hot world. And then when the founding fathers started America, they basically it was a lot of white men who were like, oh, that's too fancy. Like that, we have to reject European frippery, like French royal courts. We have to wear black suits, and that became the American uniform at work, especially through the Industrial Revolution, when like suits became cheap to make, and that actually spread around the world. So in a lot of countries everywhere, people in offices are wearing dark suits, and it's been remarkably unchanged.
We're not wearing wigs though. We're not wearing delicate shirt cuffs. Yeah. So it could be worse, is what I'm saying.
That's true.
I don't understand. Like we went to casual Fridays, and like people were wearing khakis. The pandemic, and then we came back to work, and we're still wearing our yoga pants. And when the runways show me, I don't know if we have this picture. And producers,
I don't know if we can show that.
If you didn't put this out, we're gonna have to talk after the show. But when runways start showing Guys in
blazers with shorts.
Well, she's talking about a different picture.
Well,
there's an Yves Saint Laurent menswear look from this summer where the model is wearing truly like a nightmare, like an actual nightmare outfit that I've actually had a nightmare about. He's walking down the runway with a big blazer, a sort of a sweater top, and no pants. No pants. You could maybe describe them as shorts, but it's really like
we've
more
all
of
had
an
that
undergarment.
dream.
Yeah.
We're talking with Chris Rauser, editor-at-large of Bloomberg Pursuits, the only man we know who can both write 2,000 words on wearing shorts to the office and then wear shorts when it's above 90 degrees. Yes, Carol?
You know what I find interesting is you also talk to people in the fashion industry, and there was one person who said, when I was an intern at Women's Wear Daily in Paris as an 18-year-old, in my exit interview, I was told by my editor that it was inappropriate for me to wear shorts to work. It was sweltering in Paris. But I would think anything connected with fashion would be like anything kind of goes.
I mean, it's so much about respect, right? Like if you're a journalist, and I want to really say this, like I once wore sandals to work when I was a young reporter at the New York Daily News, and someone talked to me about it, and they were like, because we had to run out and interview people that something happened, an emergency, and it was disrespectful, and that is real. Like if you're meeting with people, how you present yourself, if you're formal, it talks about how you respect yourself, how you respect the people you meet with. That really sticks with people. But if you're just hanging out at your desk or you're moving around the city, I don't know, guys.
It's hot.
Dress for the job you have.
Listen, if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life. You get to write 2,000 words about wearing shorts to work. It's not work.
Are we going to talk about luxury
Maybe
shopping?
we have to move to Norway because they kind of get it, right?
Yes.
Why is everybody talks about Norway right now?
Well, I know. It seems like a place to be, but they kind of inside outsred, right? Environment, like they just kind of embrace
like
it
Bermuda,
all.
they wear shorts. Norway, they have
right.
this sort of metaphor for life called frulivsliv. I always get it wrong. Which is basically like outdoor living is life. And the more you recognize the world and your place in it, and the more you spend time passing through it, the better you are mentally and physically.
Norway. We got the shorts pick, I guess?
Do we have it?
You know, I went to Norway.
Can we bring it up?
Maybe like 9 years ago, 10 years ago with my wife.
For those who, well, I'm just going to say, for those who are
Carol.
listening on radio, that is the picture that Chris said. Yves Saint Laurent?
Yves Saint Laurent, yeah.
Yeah, and it's a guy with a big blazer, but not much else, right?
Yeah, we clearly still haven't figured out what to wear with socks, but that's a whole other thing.
Let's talk about luxury shopping.
Well, you were saying you were in...
Well, I was in Norway, and this whole idea of outdoor culture, there's a law, at least there was back then. You were literally allowed to camp anywhere on the side of the road. So you'd be driving through these amazing roads, and people would just be pulled over. And everyone's, it's not like campsites in the U.S. I mean, everyone is so respectful of the outdoors. They're so respectful of their surroundings. Nice. But it's just widely accepted that you can pull over and you can sleep outside.
Are we going to tease this one other story?
Yeah, let's tease this other story.
So if I can't get like a Chanel bag that I'm coveting, I just have to go to the airport?
I wouldn't say you just have to go to the airport, but airport shopping, you always go by those boutiques, whether luxury or not. Like you walk by a Chanel at the airport, you're like, there's never anyone in there. But actually, they do a big business. A lot of them are owned by these big sort of mega companies that run them all. So it's not necessarily like Brooks Brothers owning the Brooks Brothers store. But they're small footprints and they do a lot of business. It doesn't have to be a lot of people in there. And at stores like Chanel and Hermes, if you have a good relationship with them, they can actually get you good stuff. Not a Birkin bag, but like good stuff. And if you can get someone's phone number, they'll like call ahead, order stuff, have it ready for you. You just pick it up, tax free.
I'm always going to airports being like, who is in here buying stuff?
Because they do always look empty.
Yeah, but people spend a lot more time in airports because you're so worried about getting, getting caught up in lines and stuff. So people are in airports for a long time and they just shop.
I love that you like call ahead and you're like, I'm going to be flying into the airport in like 2 weeks, and they hold stuff for you.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Our thanks to Chris Rauser, Bloomberg Pursuits editor-at-large.
And that wraps up our weekend edition of Bloomberg Business Week from Bloomberg Radio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Be sure to tune into Bloomberg Business Week daily, Monday through Friday, starting at 2 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg TV, and on SiriusXM Channel 121.
You can also watch our daily broadcast on YouTube. Just search Bloomberg Podcasts. We're simulcast on Bloomberg Originals, available on Bloomberg.com/originals, and streaming platforms including Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Samsung TV Plus, and more.
there.
Find our Bloomberg Business Week podcast at Bloomberg.com, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. This past week, we featured a conversation with Mark Gurman. He's Bloomberg Managing Editor for Consumer Tech. We talked Apple's lawsuit against OpenAI, accusing the company of systematically stealing its intellectual property, as well as OpenAI's latest move into consumer hardware. Plus, the latest edition of the magazine. It's available on newsstands now at Bloomberg.com and always on the Bloomberg terminal. I'm Tim Stenevec.
And I'm Carol Masser. Have a good and safe weekend, everyone. Do stay cool and stay with us. And wear your shorts, maybe. Today's top stories and global business headlines, though, are coming up right now.
Broadcasting 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. Powered by more than 3,000 journalists and analysts in over 100 bureaus around the world. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, an update from our partners at ABC News.
From ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson. One potential source of the stomach bug sickening thousands in 34 states has been found. ABC's Mike Kajachi.
An FDA traceback points to shredded lettuce from central Mexico supplied by Taylor Farms to Taco Bell restaurants in 5 states: Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and West Virginia. Now, Taylor Farms, one of the nation's largest producers of fresh veggies, is voluntarily pulling all of its central Mexico iceberg lettuce from the U.S. market indefinitely.
Winds carrying smoke from hundreds of wildfires in Minnesota and Canada across more than a dozen states. Kevin Wilson's in New York City, where the National Guard was giving out masks at transit hubs.
A little bit scary, a little dangerous. I didn't know the smoke could come so far from Canada.
ER Dr. Jason Milk at the Cleveland Clinic is seeing more patients with smoke-related breathing problems.
They're feeling really short of breath, heavy on the chest, and they can't breathe.
Some people from Cleveland to the Northeast are getting relief from the smoke, but at a cost. Bad storms with flash flood watches and possible tornadoes are forecast. Sirens in Kuwait City. The U.S. and Iran exchanging more air attacks. Kuwait announcing it shot down Iranian missiles. Iran declares the memorandum of understanding, that initial agreement, is over. Will that change things much? ABC's Stephen Portnoy in Washington.
I'm not sure that it will. I mean, given how intense things have gotten prior to this moment, where Iran now says the MOU is dead. It was 10 days ago that the president declared the ceasefire over. And since then, it's basically been the U.S.'s view that the MOU is dead. So I guess it's now been seconded by Tehran.
Marine biologists say California is experiencing one of its most active shark summers in nearly a decade.
There are sharks near them all the time. They just don't know it. Like, you have a better chance of winning Powerball than you do of being bitten by a shark.
Dr. Chris Lowe heads Cal State University's Shark Lab. You're listening to ABC News.
Now, Bloomberg Radio weather on SiriusXM 121.
Afternoon travel delays are a possibility to and from the Chicago area due to scattered showers and thunderstorms. The temperatures in Chicago near 90 this afternoon. Tampa, another spot where showers and thunderstorms may delay travelers. Temperatures in Tampa are going to be near 89 this afternoon. Watch for delays to and from Philadelphia due to scattered showers and thunderstorms this afternoon. Some of them may be strong. Temperatures near 87 in Philadelphia. Boston may have problems with late-day showers and storms. Temperatures in Boston, they're going to be up close to 85. If you're traveling to or from the Washington area, watch for showers and thunderstorms. Some could be quite strong. It's near 92 in Washington during the afternoon. Another area that may have problems with showers and thunderstorms would be Albany. Temperatures in Albany near 87. I'm Rob Carolyn, and that's your Bloomberg Travelers Forecast. Now back to the latest headlines from ABC News.
Since President Trump's speech Thursday about election security, repeating false and debunked claims, Senator Bill Cassidy, Louisiana Republican, is not alone in saying the nation's election system is too large and diverse for any foreign adversary to target.
Every state has their own system, and within that state there's sometimes subsystems. And so it would take a really massive effort to do that. I'm not saying we shouldn't be vigilant, but that is not what bubbles up to the top of my mind.
Cassidy says politicians should be talking about affordability. Tomorrow is the big night of the World Cup Championship in Rutherford, New Jersey, Spain versus Argentina. ESPN senior writer Gab Marcotti.
Most of these Spain players are not coming off great seasons at club level, but what they do is they keep the ball exceptionally well. They're a high possession team. They're a blue collar team against an Argentina side who, have individual match winners beyond Lionel Messi, but really are geared around him.
Preferring uniqueness.
Most New Jersey voters, 64%, tell the Fairleigh Dickinson poll they oppose changing the rules to allow self-service in New Jersey. Support for full-service gasoline is higher among women, who pollsters say traditionally have seen it as safer to have someone around pumping gas. But the gap between men and women also could be just men saying that they like doing things with their cars.
ABC's Wayne Cabot. Chuck Severson, ABC News.
And I'm Monica Ricks in the Bloomberg newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. A losing week for the S&P 500 with chip stocks moving into a bear market. Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet has details.
Stocks finished the week lower. Semis dipped following the reveal of an AI model from a Chinese startup. The S&P 500 index was down 1.5% on the week, snapping 2 straight weeks of gains. The Dow fell for a second week, down 0.9%. NASDAQ this week down 2.9%. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
SpaceX shares also tumbled Friday, erasing more than $1 trillion in market value from the rocket and artificial intelligence giant's all-time high. The stock fell 5.4%, giving the company a market value of $1.63 trillion. The value stood at $2.6 trillion in its third day of trading last month. The Trump administration is considering plans for an independent regulator to vet the safety of artificial intelligence models. We get more on that from Bloomberg's Ed Kalegi.
It comes after Silicon Valley leaders complained about the ad hoc nature of recent U.S. moves to slow the release of cutting-edge AI systems. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent helped develop the proposal, which would create an independent regulatory agency for AI that would report to the Securities and Exchange Commission, similar to the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. The plan is now being reviewed by White House Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. Ed Kalegi, Bloomberg Radio.
Apple's in talks to settle a 2024 lawsuit with the Justice Department that claims the iPhone maker violated antitrust laws. The DOJ accused Apple of monopolizing the market for high-end smartphones, in part by blocking so-called super apps and discouraging outside messaging solutions. So far, the two sides have reportedly exchanged draft settlement materials, but there's no guarantee they'll reach an agreement. A small protest was held outside the federal courthouse in Oakland, California yesterday as a judge was set to hold a hearing for 12 states suing to block Paramount Skydance's proposed merger with Warner Brothers Discovery. Comedian and CNN host W. Kamau Bell.
I value journalistic independence. I also value the fact that we live in a time where the more media consolidation we have, the less choices we have.
Paramount says the lawsuit distorts settled antitrust law and misrepresents competition in the entertainment industry. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Monica Ricks, and this is Bloomberg.
Thursday, it's a Bloomberg News exclusive.
The United Nations is crucial.
It's a world of fragmentation. It's a world of tension.
For the first time in 10 years, the United Nations is set for a leadership change.
Trust in the organization is waning.
The candidates for Secretary General debate live from UN headquarters.
We are stronger when we stand together.
UN Town Hall, the next Secretary General. Thursday afternoon at 5 Eastern. Only on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app.
This is Bloomberg Law.
Congress can have no say in making an office independent.
I think all agencies need a degree of autonomy.
It really tests whether the amendments to the law have teeth.
Interviews with prominent attorneys and Bloomberg legal experts.
Joining me is constitutional law professor David Super, Bloomberg News Supreme Court reporter Greg Storr.
And analysis of important legal issues, cases, and headlines.
Apple's a walled garden. They don't license their technology.
That is a valid basis to dismiss the case.
Bloomberg Law with June Grosso from Bloomberg Radio.
Welcome to the Bloomberg Law Show. I'm June Grosso. Ahead in this hour, will Todd Blanche be confirmed as the next Attorney General? Supreme Court justices testify before Congress about growing threats to their safety. And 12 states are suing to stop Paramount from taking over Warner Brothers.
Senator, I will say that President Trump trusts me to give him counsel. Counsel does not mean yes, man, and so that's true in my case, like it should be in any Attorney General's.
Todd Blanche tried to assure skeptical senators that he was no longer acting as President Trump's personal lawyer. But then there was this answer, which seemed to indicate that the Justice Department would not be independent from Trump under Blanche's leadership.
The Department of Justice, like every single department in the executive, is part of the executive. I mean, Article 2 of the Constitution gives the power of the executive to President Trump. So we certainly operate with integrity. We certainly operate in the single mindset to serve the American people and do the right thing. But I am a member, if confirmed, I will be a member of the cabinet.
For 5 contentious hours, Blanche was questioned about his brief but tumultuous tenure as acting attorney general, which saw the bungled release of the Epstein files, the prosecution of the president's political enemies, criticism of DOJ lawyers by federal judges, and the topic that drew the most questions was Blanche's creation of a $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund to compensate Trump's allies. Though Blanche insisted the fund is dead, Trump hasn't agreed to that in writing, and under questioning by Republican Senator John Cornyn, Blanche admitted that the agreement could be resurrected.
Is the settlement agreement enforceable as a contract by the parties?
Well, yes, it's an enforceable document. So I suppose if President Trump's counsel sought to enforce it, that they potentially could.
Including the weaponization fund.
Well, they could try to enforce it.
With Democrats united against Blanche, he needs the votes of every Republican on the Senate Judiciary Committee, or his nomination will fail. Joining me is constitutional law expert David Super, a professor at Georgetown Law. David, what's your general impression of how Blanche did?
I mean, he's a smart lawyer. There are some lawyers in Trump's orbit who are completely incompetent. Blanche is certainly not one of those. And he's, I think, fairly quick on his feet, but he's got a record that's very difficult to defend, and he's got a boss who won't let him promise to do things that any reasonable attorney general would do. So he's been in a box several times. Some of the Democrats have done a pretty good job of pinning him down. Some of them have done a less good job of pinning him down, and some of them have just talked.
There were a lot of questions about whether Blanche would be independent from President Trump. And in response to a question from Democratic Senator Chris Coons, Blanche basically said that the Justice Department is part of the executive branch. If confirmed, he'll be part of the cabinet, and we all serve at the pleasure of the president. I don't know that he ever really asserted independence from the president.
No, he really didn't. I mean, at one point he said that we will act with integrity. At another point, he made the predictable statement that, of course, if he was asked to do something illegal, he would resign, but that would never happen with this president. But he is part of a Justice Department that is asserting a historically broad reading of presidential powers, which includes no independence for anybody in the executive branch, himself included. So he can't claim to be independent without having that used against his own lawyers when they're asserting their unified executive theory.
So everyone knew that a big point was going to be the so-called anti-weaponization fund. He said several times the fund is dead, but Republican Senator John Cornyn, who's a key vote, pinned him down. And Blanche admitted that the settlement agreement is a contract and it could conceivably be resurrected.
That leads me to believe that the president is not comfortable with the weaponization fund being dead, because Mr. Blanche could have gotten himself out of a lot of trouble by agreeing to provide a letter declaring that, and he wouldn't do it. And when he was pressed on whether they could sue for breach of contract, he more or less acknowledged that they could and didn't really have much of an answer to that. So I think President Trump has made a firm decision that he wants to help the January 6th rioters, and Mr. Blanche is trying to avoid saying anything that will burn bridges that he knows he's going to have to cross.
And on Monday, In a scathing opinion, a Florida federal judge said Blanche's involvement in settling Trump's lawsuit with the IRS raised conflict of interest concerns because he was Trump's former defense lawyer, and she ordered a copy of her decision to be sent to the state bar in New York, where there are several other complaints alleging serious ethical breaches by Blanche, one by hundreds of former federal judges. When he was confronted with that, Blanche said, well, that's not a referral. But it is in essence a referral, isn't it?
That's a referral. I'm quite convinced the New York State Bar can spring for a online search and get a copy of the opinion on their own. The fact that she is sending it to them suggests that she independently believes there's material in there that they ought to see. And given how scathing it is, that's obviously correct. The Attorney General is the highest law enforcement official in the country, has many responsibilities to the American people, and certainly one of them is to set a standard for ethical behavior. Now, anyone can file a complaint, and the mere fact that a complaint has been filed should not be pivotal. But the fact that some fairly serious people whose reputations matter filed complaints should give us cause. And I would think the committee should get to the bottom of them. If Mr. Blanche has not done anything unethical, a complaint shouldn't stand in his way. But there certainly are reasons to question some things that have happened.
There wasn't much questioning about something I think is critical, and that's the Justice Department losing credibility with federal judges. But Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse did ask about that.
Between judges appointed by every president harshly criticizing the department's work in your tenure, grand juries rejecting indictments, judicial findings of outright misconduct, capable lawyers fleeing the stinking ship, this seems to be the most troubled Department of Justice in history.
David, we've talked before about how federal judges are repeatedly finding fault with the Justice Department and its attorneys. Blanche denied that, but that is true.
I think it's unfortunate that this part of the hearing was played so theatrically. I would have loved to see a senator take a list of orders, read from this order, ask Mr. Blanche, why did your Justice Department do that? Then read from the next order, why did your Justice Department do that? And show by repeated questions just how prevalent this is, which is enormous and utterly unprecedented. As someone who has litigated against the Justice Department, their lawyers are a total pain in the neck, but they don't lie. They say nasty things, but they don't lie. Except now, they do.
Blanche was questioned by several senators about the bungled release of the Epstein files. He defended the release, but acknowledged that mistakes had been made, and he apologized to the victims. But Democratic Senator Cory Booker pressed him on the fact that Ghislaine Maxwell was transferred to a low-security prison camp just days after Blanche interviewed her. And Booker shot down Blanche's answer that it was because she was getting threats.
When people are under threats in a Bureau of Prison facility, they're put into solitary confinement or protective. They're not moved to a camp.
That's not always true.
It is.
You're
well,
just
what
wrong.
is what is true is someone that is accused of child sex trafficking under the Bureau of Prison's own policies is not put in a facility like this that seems clearly like a reward.
Senator Booker did get him to state explicitly that he had no involvement in the transfer. I don't particularly believe that. You don't sound like you particularly believe that. But there are lower-level people who know the answer to that. And if he lied about that, then he has just opened himself up to a perjury prosecution, and the statute of limitations on that will extend into the next presidential term.
At least Blanche succeeded in keeping the temperature down with his sort of measured answers.
I was struck with how he kept trying to wriggle out of questions when it would seem that there was a fairly simple way to answer them. Would he agree to meet the Epstein victims? Evasion. Did ethics approve his dinner with the people whose antitrust investigation he was about to terminate? Evasion. If he had nothing to hide, why not just say yes? to some of these questions. And maybe that comes down to combativeness, but I assume it's because there's more to be said to the story.
I question if these hearings really matter. Lately, they seem to be just performative. It seems to be coming down to one Republican senator, John Cornyn, who said he's not decided yet. But with these judiciary hearings, the Republican senators all seem to fall in line and vote the party line in the end. Do you think that's what will happen here?
I think so, and I find that very distressing. There's no question that President Trump will get an attorney general to his liking and an attorney general who will do what he says on a great many things. But to confirm someone as attorney general who has already been personally involved in so much misconduct seems very unfortunate, and I wish more senators would say, you get your person, but not this one.
We'll find out what they say in a few weeks. Thanks so much, David. That's Professor David Super of Georgetown Law. Coming up next on the Bloomberg Law Show, 12 Democratic-led states make a last-ditch effort to stop Paramount's $111 billion takeover of Warner Brothers. They say it violates antitrust law, and they filed suit. I'm June Grosso, and you're listening to Bloomberg.
And I'm Monica Ricks in the Bloomberg newsroom. Here's some of the stories we're watching. Iran says it's suspending its commitments under an interim peace deal and unleashed heavy attacks on Gulf neighbors in retaliation for the latest round of U.S. strikes aimed at Tehran's military capabilities and infrastructure. Bloomberg national security reporter Courtney McBride has the latest.
We are seeing tit-for-tat strikes between the U.S. and Iran, and we're not quite at the point of an escalation to or return to full-scale conflict, but we certainly are seeing more damage and expansion of targets by the U.S., both geographically and in terms of the types of sites that are being hit.
Kuwait suffered one of the heaviest barrages overnight since the conflict started, including hits to its airport and an oil facility. Here at home, millions are muddling through more unhealthy air from uncontrolled wildfires in Canada. Bloomberg's Emily Forgash is covering this and says conditions seem to be improving.
It has gotten a bit better today and will keep getting better through the day. We expect some rain in New York today. That should help. And yeah, the World Cup match seems to be happening tomorrow, although that can always change.
Emily Forgash on Bloomberg This Weekend. FIFA says it's monitoring the situation but doesn't expect the final to be impacted. Federal health officials have identified lettuce from Mexico served by Taco Bell locations across 5 states as a source of that stomach-churning parasite, Psychospora. The USDA is also looking into Taylor Farms products, including their salad kits, which have been linked to the outbreak. Homeland Security Secretary Markwayne Mullin has promised an aggressive attack against voter fraud ahead of midterms.
If you are an illegal or you're voting illegally, we will hunt you down. We will find you, and we will prosecute you.
Mullin also threatened state elections officials with fines and possible prison time if they don't hand over sensitive voter data. The threat follows President Trump's primetime address this week, reviving unsubstantiated claims about the 2020 election. And 2 U.S. service workers are safe and free now after being held hostage for hours yesterday in a forest in Northern California. The suspect reportedly zip-tied and held them at gunpoint in a trailer before drones tracked them down and authorities arrested the man. 49-year-old Joseph Henriksen now faces federal kidnapping charges. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Monica Ricks, and this is Bloomberg.
Hello, I'm Michelle Hussein. And each week on my show, I have one thoughtful conversation that brings the world into sharper focus.
I always trust in the president. He's playing 3-dimensional chess.
Every time you say something tough to Mark Zuckerberg, he looks like you killed him. I just never want to talk about Vladimir Putin again.
Every week, one conversation that helps you make sense of the moment. The Michelle Hussein Show from Bloomberg Weekend, wherever you get your podcasts.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest edition of the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast from Future Standard, Troy Gajewski.
Look, I mean, big picture, right? The consumer went from about 138% debt to income going into the GFC. They're now down to 92. Tom, we've had 11% deleveraging in the consumer. You look at the banking system, the banking system has delevered substantially, right? You're talking about institutions that were close to 100x that are now 10 to 15x. Their tier one capital is up 2 to 3 times.
Right.
So no, we're nowhere near there in the financial system.
Damien, jump in here with one more.
To Troy's point, right? We really aren't seeing sort of a bottleneck in the financial plumbing of the U.S. yet. What would make something like that give you a cause for alarm?
Well, I think there's things to divorce, right? One is the health of the banking system, which is very strong, the health of commercial real estate, which has bottomed out. And then there's what you should be concerned about. And one of the things we've been very concerned about for the back end of the Treasury curve is our 5 to 7%, maybe even 8% new supply coming out like clockwork each and every year. And then to your point, tied to the hyperscaler issuance, when you think of markets that don't have material upside and could have downside, you have to look at the back end of duration. And that's one of the reasons you just don't get paid that much for take that risk. Wow. And to bring it all home for everybody, that's one of the reasons that senior commercial real estate lending has become popular again. It's not just the spread to risk free, it's the concern over how much upside, if any, do you have in long duration, and could the yield curve continue to steepen materially as we've expected for quite some time.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
This is Bloomberg Law with June Grosso from Bloomberg Radio.
Movie theaters, basic cable TV distributors, and audiences on every sofa and in every movie seat would feel the impact of this unlawful merger.
California is leading a lawsuit by a dozen states to block the largest merger in the history of Hollywood. The states allege that Paramount's $110 billion takeover of Warner Brothers Discovery would result in less competition, higher prices for consumers, and fewer choices on the big and small screens. The Justice Department cleared the transaction without any conditions last month. And California Attorney General Rob Bonta says the states are suing because the federal government is not enforcing the antitrust laws.
DOJ, the federal government, has advocated its responsibility to engage in firm and fair antitrust enforcement. That's been a traditional role they've played. They're not playing it now. Not only are they not playing it, but they're actually affirmatively making things worse by trying to usher through deals that are unlawful.
Paramount vowed to vigorously defend the transaction. My guest is an expert in antitrust law, Professor Harry First of NYU Law School. Harry, the states claim that this deal would create a media behemoth.
So, yes, there are 5 big companies, but monopolistic and 5 don't go together. Maybe, in talking about power in sort of a colloquial way, but from a legal point of view, we're not talking about monopoly, but we are talking about significant power. And for antitrust, it's market power. For Hollywood, it's money. For many people, it's cultural power. And apparently for the president, it's CNN. I mean, I don't know, but that seems to be. So it's lots of things colliding, which makes the merger really interesting, along many dimensions. So what makes it also interesting and horrible in a way is that the story plays out in a way that we're too familiar with today in the Trump administration, but really we've never seen before in this direct, overt way, which is there's the law and there's we don't care about the law. It's, what the president wants today. And this case has played along those 2 tracks. And the spoiler in this is also partly political, but has to play on the legal track. Can't play on the political track, and that's the states.
As you referred to there, the merger has been the subject of intense lobbying in D.C. by Paramount. So tell us about the political track of the deal.
The political background starts unusually before Paramount's bid for Warner is accepted or really made legally. And if you read what the Justice Department did at the very end, they said in June that we've been investigating this for 8 months. That's pretty interesting since the merger was just noticed to them in February. I know my math is bad, but it's not that bad. That means they started investigating this case before the merger was officially notified. Now, normal practice is you can't get the Justice Department to tell you what they're going to do until you do something. You can't call them up and say, excuse me, will you give me an advisory opinion? In some jurisdictions you can. In the United States you can't. But apparently these people could, because this was going on at a time when the president was just putting a big thumb, I don't know, hand, arm on the scales for Paramount. Okay, so in February, this deal gets cleared without what's called a second request. So in important mergers, the government says, excuse me, you can't close the deal until we look more deeply at all the documents. So you have to hold off until you've produced all the documents to our satisfaction. That's the norm in a big deal like this. Not for this deal. In February, they say, we're not even going to do a second request.
That's the political track. What about the legal track to the deal?
They go through some sort of investigation and they close the investigation, which they've already sort of closed by not issuing a second request. They closed this just in June. And a couple things interesting about that. Normally, the Justice Department does not issue closing statements to explain what they're doing. It's very rare. And one of the problems with filing closing statements is that the people who write them have certain goals. One is to justify what they've done, but another goal may be to short circuit other plaintiffs. So if you can write this and say, you know, my God, this case was, poof, you know, nothing there, baby, and you think the states are going to file, you know that a federal judge is going to read that, and maybe it will affect what they do.
Can you give us the highlights of the Justice Department's closing statement?
There are certain things that are not there and certain things presented in an interesting way. So they start out with streaming as, you know, nothing to see here. Well, in some ways, that actually is the weaker part or the less suspicious part of the case. There are 3 major streaming services and a 4th if you put in Disney, HBO Max and Paramount Plus. You know, these are distant competitors. So you can make a credible claim that it's still a very competitive market and not one to sue about. So that's where they start. And then they go to what they call linear TV, which I think is an interesting description. You know, I'm not sure exactly what they mean by that, except they've combined 2 words that indicate junk. So it's supposed to be cable. Hard to say exactly. They're not really clear, but they say, you know, no problem here because this kind of TV faces so much competition from pay services, from streaming, from live, from sports, from blah, blah, from who knows, not a problem here. And then, of course, they save for last the thing that you might start with first, which is studio film production, because this is where the parties are direct competitors. Paramount and Warner, you know, they make blockbusters, but, you know, nothing to see here because after all, lots of competitors. Netflix makes theatrical releases. Yeah, I guess. Amazon and Disney, and there's lots of other stuff. And so don't worry about that. And don't worry about impact on workers in Hollywood because all the incentives are to make more films and distribute them theatrically. And nothing about viewpoint diversity, which a lot of people are worried about, but it's hard to make out as an antitrust matter. You know, CNN and CBS under the same tent. Enough concern about CBS now, but now they're going to control CNN. No mention of that. Doesn't give us any market shares. So that's the first thing you look for, but doesn't mention that. And to cap it off nicely, the Wall Street Journal follows with a story that says, shock and amazement, the staffers working on this were surprised when the closing statement was issued, which they had no role in drafting. Sound familiar?
Yes, it happened when the Justice Department in D.C. settled the Live Nation Ticketmaster suit without telling the career attorneys who were prepping for trial. Harry, did the states draft their complaint around or in response to what the Justice Department had stated in its summary of why it was declining to prosecute the case?
If you were being skeptical of this complaint, you'd say this is the complaint to save all the parts of Hollywood that everyone says is dead. The movie theaters, the big motion picture theatrical producers, and the cable companies. And it's basic cable. It's not fancy cable that we pay for with bazillions of dollars. It's basic cable that gets you the basic channels, not the premium channels. It gets you the over-the-air broadcasting. So that's the focus of this complaint. It's not on streaming. This is, to my first reading, a non-ideological, carefully drafted complaint designed to stop this merger and not get embroiled in any fancy theories. There's no labor market theory in this. They start with the place where justice stops, which is wide release theatrical films, where the competition is direct. And then they go to the super sellers, the anticipated top grossing theatrical films, which is something the Justice Department did in the booksellers merger. The New York Times bestsellers was the market there, the Bertelsmann case. So there are echoes there. This is carefully done. And then licensing of basic cable channels. And it points out how the two companies are bringing together Turner stuff, all sorts of stuff. And the cable companies need the package. They need the bundle of stuff. And maybe the fancy people have cut the cord, but there's still a lot of people who are looking at their cable. And it's aimed at that. And I think it's very clever.
Do the states talk numbers which the feds didn't?
We now have concentration figures, Herfindahl-Hirschman index, a fancy way of saying that these are concentrated markets. And the complaint references the merger guidelines, the federal merger guidelines, saying these are way over the top. Nice job. And they're looking directly at horizontal competition and price raising. Sort of one final thing that I noticed, it's co-signed in counsel by a private law firm that's been hired by California and signed by a very highly respected antitrust litigator, Rich Parker. This is a well done, careful complaint. From my reading, well done. So this deal is not over yet, and it's not, a throwaway complaint.
In response to the lawsuit, Paramount said numerous antitrust authorities around the world have concluded the transaction creates a stronger competitor against dominant streaming and technology platforms that have harmed the market for theatrical exhibition and jobs in the entertainment industry.
So that's a clever political statement. It's a bad legal statement. I mean, it's not an effective legal statement, but that's not supposed to be, I guess. To say that, the merger will help streaming is sort of irrelevant under basic antitrust law, which has not been challenged, that you can't justify a merger that hurts competition in one market by saying, oh, but look over here. Gosh, we've got some help over in a different market. So that's not going to work. Now, if you're going to somehow say this will help competition in the market for theatrical movie releases, well, that's going to be a bit of a hard sell, I think. Going around in this, although the closing statement doesn't mention, there's a lot of talk about their promise of 30 new films after this merger. And, a lot of commentary saying, what are you smoking? Those sort of promises tend to be discounted as a general matter, but people pointing out that releases have been contracted a number of years ahead with exhibitors. So, the idea that all of a sudden you're going to increase output by 30 more, it's going to be up to them to prove. That's going to be their burden. The justification, it's on them.
The states made a motion to pause the takeover, and a federal judge said she'll rule on their request by next Wednesday. So we shall see what happens. Thanks so much, Harry. It's always a pleasure. That's Professor Harry First of NYU Law School. Coming up next on the Bloomberg Law Show, Supreme Court justices are asking Congress for more money for next year's budget because they're getting increasing threats. I'm June Grosso, and this is Bloomberg.
This is your only 24-hour source for world markets and breaking business news. Bloomberg Radio. Coming up, the latest market-moving headlines from Bloomberg. First, an update from our partners at ABC News.
ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson. 2 service members were killed yesterday in Iranian drone and missile attacks in Jordan, and a third is missing, says the U.S. military. Iran declares that initial agreement or memorandum is over. It's still smoky and hazardous to breathe for millions in the Midwest and East, says ABC's Morgan Norwood.
Washington, D.C. and New York have the worst air quality among major cities around the world as smoke from the Canadian wildfires continue to spread from the nation's capital, touching Boston and Buffalo. Washington's skyline blurred behind a thick haze. Tourists masking up.
Source of the stomach bug affecting thousands has been traced to iceberg lettuce in Mexico and a supplier to Taco Bell's in 5 states. Why is California having its most active shark summer in nearly a decade?
Warming water pushes bait closer to shore, and that bait then brings sharks closer to shore where people are.
Dr. Chris Lowe, Cal State Shark Lab. This is ABC News.
And I'm Ed Kalegi in the Bloomberg Newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. A losing week for the S&P 500 index, with chip stocks moving into a bear market. We get the story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The SOX, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange Semiconductor Index, is now down 20% from a recent high, and that meets the definition of a bear market. Stocks finished the week lower. Semis dipped following the reveal of an AI model from a Chinese startup. The S&P 500 Index was down 1.5% on the week, snapping 2 straight weeks of gains. The Dow fell for a second week, down 0.9%. NASDAQ this week down 2.9%. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Meta is in early talks to lease computing power from its data centers to Anthropic. Experts say it is an opportunity for the social media giant to build a new business around its heavy investment in AI infrastructure. Senate efforts to pass a landmark cryptocurrency bill have hit a snag. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
Democratic negotiators have indicated they don't yet support the latest GOP framework of the Clarity Act. Democrats have voiced lingering reservations about the GOP's latest negotiating stance, signaling challenges for the bill, which Senator Adam Schiff says, quote, needs a lot of improvement, adding that the White House has backtracked on ethics provisions. Lawmakers have a limited time to review the legislation before the Senate goes on recess after August 7th. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Apple is in talks to settle a 2024 lawsuit with the U.S. Justice Department that claims the iPhone maker violated antitrust laws. The DOJ accused Apple of monopolizing the market for high-end smartphones, in part by blocking so-called super apps and discouraging outside messaging solutions. So far, the two sides have exchanged draft settlement materials, but there is no guarantee that they will reach an agreement. SpaceX shares tumbled on Friday, erasing more than $1 trillion in market value from the rocket and artificial intelligence giant's all-time high. On Friday, the stock fell 5.4%, giving the company a market value of $1.63 trillion. The value stood at $2.64 trillion in its third day of trading last month. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Ed Kalegi. This is Bloomberg.
Hey deck builders, get up to 15% back during the deck days of summer with Envision Outdoor Living products. Save on Envision Ridge Premium and Distinction Composite Decking with Cool Tread technology. Plus, max out your savings when you add Fairway Railing products to your next summer deck project. Save today on a deck that's crafted for tomorrow. Visit EnvisionOutdoorLiving.com.
Catch up with the biggest names in business. Listen to Bloomberg Podcasts. The Circuit with Emily Chang.
I speak with JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon.
Odd Lots with Joe Weisenthal and Tracy Alloway.
Austin Goolsbee, the Chicago Fed president.
And Bloomberg Wall Street Week with David Weston.
A discussion with BlackRock's Larry Fink.
Listen on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app and anywhere you get your podcasts.
We have the perfect guest for this topic.
Bloomberg Podcasts. Context changes everything.
Get essential news on the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers. Hi, I'm Ed Ludlow. Join me for Bloomberg Tech, a daily podcast focused exclusively on technology, innovation, and the future of business. Every weekday, we bring you the latest insights on Silicon Valley's top companies and conversations with tech's biggest decision makers. Listen to Bloomberg Tech on your commute home and stay ahead of the news cycle. Subscribe today on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you listen.
Explore the most interesting topics in finance, markets, and economics.
How the central bank processes and delivers cash.
A 3-part series about chicken.
How Gen Z sees the world.
The Odd Lots Podcast with Joe Weisenthal and Tracy Alloway.
How important AI is becoming to the U.S. economy.
Listen on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app or anywhere you get your podcasts.
Have you ever hand-pollinated something?
No.
It's fun.
Bloomberg Podcasts. Context changes everything.
Next week on Leaders with me, Francine Lacqua. I speak to Vimal Kapoor, the chief executive of Honeywell, about his family's reaction to him getting the top job.
Nobody expected me to get this far.
His advice for workers in dealing with the growth of AI.
Skill elevation is the name of the game.
And how he's learning about management today.
YouTube is kind of new way to go.
Listen and watch Leaders with me, Francine Lacqua, on Bloomberg Television or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. When you talk about inflation, it could just come down to one single word. Talking about plastics could be the next big inflation headache. 98% made from fossil fuels. Supply is short because of shipping problems in the Middle East, according to Phil Schertz, oil analyst with Bloomberg Intelligence.
If you look at the overall picture and you take ethylene as the case, which is the largest base chemical embedded in plastics, packaging, etc., you talk about probably 25 to 30% of global volumes being lost. So an incredible amount.
And that means ethylene prices will keep going up as shortages work their way through the supply chain.
A lot of the impact still has to materialize next couple of months.
Another oil derivative, PGP, also in short supply, all creating a domino effect as costs move through the supply chain and hit us with higher prices for things like grocery packaging and cars.
You're going to see elevated consumer prices across different products over the next couple of months, 1 to 3 quarters.
Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest edition of the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast, a conversation with Geetha Ranganathan, our analyst on U.S. media on Netflix earnings.
You know, we are seeing signs of maturity across the entire landscape and definitely for Netflix as well. So, you know, moderating revenue growth is definitely a big red flag here. And we've seen the revenue growth actually come down pretty substantially, which is what I think is really spooking investors, right? Because in the first quarter, you had about 16% revenue growth, almost 14% for the second quarter. And now when you look at their guidance for the third quarter, it's 11.7%, which was well below what consensus was expecting. So this really, I think, feeds into that whole investor anxiety about what the catalysts are going forward for this name.
And this is not something that can be solved with more spending on content and making sure you have the latest hot show or the latest franchise, is it?
They're actually boosting content spending pretty significantly this year, almost 10% to $20 billion. That's the highest ever that they would be spending on content. But, if you look at the engagement report, yes, they do have, this very broad swath of content. But at the end of the day, we're not necessarily seeing that resonate into what, the metric that all investors are focused on, which is engagement. Because while the total number of hours viewed did grow slightly, 2% from last year, the viewing hours per subscriber is actually declining. And the big worry, I think, for investors is that as we get disruption from short form video, from YouTube, from, Instagram, TikTok, can Netflix actually retain that, engagement metric?
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Bloomberg Intelligence Podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com. This is Bloomberg Law with June Grosso from Bloomberg Radio.
For some of us, those threats have come very close.
and all of us live with the knowledge that they may again materialize.
Justices Elena Kagan and Amy Coney Barrett made a rare appearance before Congress this week as the Supreme Court seeks millions of dollars to beef up security because of increasing threats against the justices. Justice Barrett said the threats have forced her children to think about and see things that children shouldn't have to. She described an incident after her security detail gave her a bulletproof vest following the leak of the Dobbs decision overturning the right to abortion. When threats to my life were particularly intense a few years ago, around the time of the Dobbs leak, my security detail sent me home with a bulletproof vest, and I carried it into my house, put it into my bedroom, dropped it down on a table, turned around, and my 12-year-old son was standing in the doorway of my bedroom. And he wanted to know what it was and why I had it. And I didn't know how to respond because maybe I lack imagination, but I didn't expect that performing this service was going to put me in the position of explaining to my children what a bulletproof vest was and why I had to wear one. Barrett also described a swatting hoax at her home just 6 weeks ago. The Supreme Court is asking for a $14.6 million increase in their budget for additional agents to protect the justices, and $6.5 million to design a visitor screening facility at the court. In total, the court is asking for $228 million for next year's budget. Joining me is constitutional law expert Louis Michael Seidman, a professor at Georgetown Law. The justices haven't come to testify to Congress about their budget since 2019. So what's the significance of this appearance?
Well, I think they're there now because they're worried about their security, and that's completely legitimate. There are serious security problems and they ought to be taken care of. But the fact is that being properly respectful of another branch of government doesn't just mean showing up when you want something from them. There are built into the Constitution checks and balances. The court can check Congress, but Congress also has the power to check the court. And frankly, I think Congress ought to be doing a better job of that. And one way of doing a better job, Congress controls the court's budget. You know, if Congress wanted to, they could cut off the lights and air conditioning. So I think they have more power than they realize they do have, and I think they ought to start using it.
I mean, has there been a Congress in our history that's cut off or limited funding to the Supreme Court?
So at the very beginning of our history, Congress terminated an entire term of the court. The court did not meet for over a year because of what Congress did. This was in the run-up to a famous case called Marbury v. Madison, where Congress canceled the term of the court because they didn't want the court to hear the case. That's a long time ago. It hasn't happened recently, but that doesn't mean it can't happen. So here's an example of something Congress could do. Each Supreme Court justice has 4 law clerks. Years ago, they had only 1. Years ago, they would decide something like 160 cases a year. Now they're down to about 60 with a quadrupled staff. There's a kind of dirty little secret. The Supreme Court justices don't write their own opinions often. They get these young law students to do it for them. So I think it would be perfectly appropriate for Congress to cut the line item for law clerks. Make them do their own work, for goodness sake. But more broadly, if Congress is not happy with how the Supreme Court is behaving, they have perfectly legitimate and constitutional means to fight back, and they ought to be more seriously thinking about using those means.
I think the problem is that Congress doesn't agree, so you'd have the Democratic lawmakers on one side and the Republican lawmakers on the other, and you know, I think the Republicans are pretty happy with the Supreme Court as it is.
Well, they're happy about some things, not about others.
True.
But yeah, sure, I think you're right. But the real problem is on the Democratic side. If they're unhappy, they can be making noise about doing something. And there seems to be this widespread perception, and I don't know where it comes from, that somehow it's illegitimate for dissatisfied members of Congress to fight back. The fact is that just in the last couple of weeks, the Supreme Court struck down maybe the most important statute Congress has passed in the 20th century, that is to say the Voting Rights Act. They effectively struck it down. They have now destroyed the ability of Congress to control the terms of executive branch employees. Those are major shots across the bow at a coordinate branch of government. And Congress has the right to respond.
I won't hold my breath for Congress to respond, at least not this Congress. And I do think that this Congress is going to give the justices the additional money because they made such a compelling case of the need for additional security to address these increasing threats. And court observers and legal scholars said they couldn't recall a more vivid accounting from sitting justices of the security challenges they face.
I think the security concerns are completely justified. Things really have changed, and they've changed for the worse. Years ago, when I worked for Justice Marshall, not only did he have no security detail, his number was listed in the phone book along with his address.
Oh, wow.
So things are just not like that anymore, and that's a legitimate concern. Now, I do think Congress has a role to play in deciding exactly what form the security should take. So, for example, it's not completely obvious to me that the best thing to do is to set up a visitor center outside the Supreme Court. I'm not an expert on security. Maybe that's necessary, maybe it's not. But I think Congress has some role to decide about what the best way to proceed is. But they certainly deserve to be safe, and the threats of the justices are a serious matter and ought to be handled appropriately.
There were some questions that were outside the budget, and one was about the Code of Ethics. All 9 justices agreed to the code in 2023 because there was all that criticism over undisclosed trips and gifts from wealthy benefactors to some justices. But Kagan and Barrett split on the need for a mechanism to enforce the code. Justice Kagan said she stood by her earlier position that there should be an enforcement mechanism. But Justice Barrett said there are significant questions over who would do the enforcing.
So I'm not saying that it would be impossible, to have an enforcement mechanism, but I think it's been complicated to figure out exactly what that would be, given the position of the Supreme Court within our constitutional structure and within the judicial branch of government. But I do want to stress, Ranking Member Reed, that none of my colleagues, and certainly not I, think ourselves above the law or above ethics in any way.
I have come to rest on the need for an enforcement mechanism if the enforcement mechanism is of the right kind. It's not because I think that we're ignoring the code of conduct. I do not think that at all. But it's important, I think, for public perception of the court. I think it's also important to give the justices a way to show that some of the charges against them are, so much poppycock.
But how useful is a code of ethics if there's nothing to enforce it?
Well, there needs to be enforcement. What's happened with a number of Supreme Court justices, frankly, is disgraceful. And, if you have life tenure and you wear these robes that are associated with being priests, and everybody stands up and says, Your Honor, whenever you walk into the room, even for normal people, that produces a kind of arrogance, I think, and that's an occupational hazard for the Supreme Court. So there ought to be an enforceable code of ethics for them, like there is for almost everybody else in the government. And again, Congress would be within its powers to impose that on the court.
That deference you just talked about showed even in this hearing, because it wasn't at all combative. There were very respectful questions asked very respectfully.
Being a Supreme Court justice is never having to explain yourself, right? The justices, they don't hold press conferences. They only rarely appear before Congress. As I said before, they often don't write their own opinions. They are unaccountable. And that creates a kind of mindset that can be really quite dangerous.
They also fielded questions about the use of the emergency docket, often referred to as the shadow docket. These orders that are typically issued early in cases and without much reasoning from the justices have been criticized, including by some of the liberal justices.
Justice Kagan said she thought the problem had gotten somewhat better. And I think it has. The justices are doing more to explain themselves, but there still is something of a problem. And I think one downside of these emergency orders without opinions is it leaves very unclear for lower court judges who are trying to do what the Supreme Court wants them to do. If the court doesn't tell them clearly what they're supposed to do, then it's very, very hard for them.
What would you have asked the justices if you were on the committee?
Well, I think it's appropriate to ask the justices about cases that they've decided. That's not a popular view. I think most other law professors would disagree with that. But I don't really see what's wrong with it. As I say, Congress is a coordinate branch of government, and if the court chooses to invalidate, as I said before, maybe the most important law passed in the 20th century, the 1965 Voting Rights Act, and by the way, the amendments to that, which were at stake, were signed by President Reagan and passed by a bipartisan Congress. If they chose to invalidate that, then they ought to be subject to questions about what their reasons are. And I just wish the legislative branch were a little more assertive in asserting the powers that it has under our Constitution.
And in the opening statement, Kagan was careful to announce that they can't address individual cases. You know, the justices testified about the budget for decades. I remember Justice Kagan appearing with Justice Samuel Alito in 2019. Why did they stop coming to Congress to testify?
This is another aspect of the court's lack of accountability. For years and years, it was traditional that every year the Chief Justice would come and testify. Then there was controversy about the Code of Ethics. Congress wanted the Chief Justice to come and explain, and he refused to do so. And so this is the first time in a long time that anybody's actually come to the Hill and talked to the senators and representatives.
We'll see if they make a return appearance next year. Thanks so much for joining me. That's Professor Louis Michael Seidman of Georgetown Law. His new book is called The Constitution Cannot Save Us: Why We Can No Longer Rely on Our Founding Document. And that's it for this edition of the Bloomberg Law Show. Remember, you can listen to all the latest legal news anytime on our Bloomberg Law podcasts. You can find them on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or at Bloomberg.com/podcast/law. I'm June Grosso. Stay with us. Today's top stories and global business headlines are coming up right now.
Broadcasting 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. Powered by more than 3,000 journalists and analysts in over 100 bureaus around the world. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, an update from our partners at ABC News.
From ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson. The war with Iran, after that initial agreement and ceasefire collapsed, has claimed more American lives. 2 service members were killed yesterday in Iranian drone and missile attacks in Jordan, and a third is missing, says the U.S. military. 16 American troops have died in the war with Iran. U.S. and Iran exchanging more air attacks. ABC's Stephen Portnoy in Washington.
This week, the White House said Iran is still talking to the U.S., but there's no sign the two sides might soon return to the table to revive the ceasefire. Overnight, global oil prices were up nearly 5%, and here at home, gasoline is now creeping closer to $4 a gallon for regular, up 12 cents in the past week, and up more than $1 since the start of the war.
It's still smoky and hazardous to breathe for millions in the Midwest and East because of the wind carrying smoke from hundreds of wildfires in Canada and Minnesota. Ontario Premier Doug Ford today.
We're doing absolutely every resource we can possibly throw at this, including bringing people in from Alberta, firefighters and water bombers from the Yukon, and any other jurisdiction that's willing to help.
The source of the stomach bug affecting thousands has been traced to iceberg lettuce in Mexico and a supplier to Taco Bell's in 5 states. Want to get a pencil and graph paper to map out this? A temporary win for the Trump administration. The Postal Service is proposing a rule that would have it refuse to deliver mail-in ballots in states that do not turn over their voter lists. A lower court blocked that order. A Washington, D.C. appeals court unblocked it, but a separate Massachusetts ruling is preventing the rule from being carried out right away. Why are marine biologists saying California has one of its most active shark summers in nearly a decade?
Warming water pushes bait closer to shore, And that bait then brings sharks closer to shore where people are.
Dr. Chris Lowe heads Cal State University's Shark Lab. You're listening to ABC News.
Now, Bloomberg Radio weather on Sirius XM 121.
Afternoon travel delays are a possibility to and from the Chicago area due to scattered showers and thunderstorms. The temperatures in Chicago near 90 this afternoon. Tampa, another spot where showers and thunderstorms may delay travelers. Temperatures in Tampa are going to be near 89 this afternoon. Watch for delays to and from Philadelphia due to scattered showers and thunderstorms this afternoon. Some of them may be strong. Temperatures near 87 in Philadelphia. Boston may have problems with late-day showers and storms. Temperatures in Boston, they're going to be up close to 85. If you're traveling to or from the Washington area, watch for showers and thunderstorms. Some could be quite strong. It's near 92 in Washington during the afternoon. Another area that may have problems with showers and thunderstorms would be Albany. Temperatures in Albany near 87. I'm Rob Carolyn, and that's your Bloomberg Travelers Forecast. Now back to the latest headlines from ABC News.
Wisconsin lawmakers are calling for Elon Musk to be charged under the state's election bribery laws after he offered million-dollar payments to voters in last year's state Supreme Court election.
We are asking not for special treatment. We are asking for equal treatment, that regardless of someone's status, wealth, or power, that they are held to the same standard.
Green Bay State Rep Ahmad Rivera-Wagner says state elections administrators have referred Musk's case to prosecutors. He's proposed a bill to boost the bribery laws. Total deaths from the two powerful earthquakes that shook Venezuela last month have been up past 5,000, say local officials. Over 16,000 injured. Two families accusing a North Dakota hospital of sending two babies home with the wrong families 38 years ago. And an at-home DNA test led Kyle Byland to a biological aunt on a genealogy platform.
She kind of concluded and said, basically, look, Kyle, I think the only way to explain this is that you were switched at birth and that I'm your biological aunt. And, that was so mind-blowing. I wanted to, potentially curl up in a ball.
Byland and Jeremy Morrison were the only babies born that day in 1988 at Unity Medical Center in Grafton, North Dakota. The hospital says it is working to better understand what happened, has not uncovered evidence that the administration or staff were responsible. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
And I'm Ed Kalegi in the Bloomberg Newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. Apple and the U.S. Justice Department are in early talks about settling a 2024 antitrust case. We get more from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Sources tell Bloomberg the discussions are active. However, there is no guarantee that the two sides will reach an agreement. They say the iPhone maker has made multiple offers this year to the Justice Department to bring the case to a close. Meanwhile, Friday, Apple briefly topped Nvidia to become the world's most valuable company, but Nvidia regained the crown by the closing bell, ending just ahead of Apple in terms of market cap. Apple shares are now at a 52-week high and just below a record in New York. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Mexico's top diplomat says its trade pact with the U.S. and Canada should be completed later this year. Bloomberg's Monica Ricks has details.
Mexico's ambassador to Washington, Roberto Lazari, says the U.S., Mexico, and Canada need to accelerate trade talks to give investors more certainty and preserve the region's competitive advantages.
The baseline for us is that we have a 10-year agreement.
But he tells Bloomberg any delay could amount to an economic hit.
Every moment that we're losing, I think we're losing competitiveness, market share, and investment. So it's in the best interest of all the three of us to get to a position of resolution soon.
The USMCA covers roughly $2 trillion in trade, and without any major changes or exits, could remain in place till 2036. Monica Ricks, Bloomberg Radio.
Rising living costs are making it tougher to save for retirement. That's the finding of 3 reports out this week. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager has the details.
A survey from NFP finds 46% of working adults are deprioritizing or just not saving because they got to take care of housing, car payments, or health care first. 27% of respondents to a Schroeder survey say they've cut back or even borrowed from workplace retirement accounts to take care of loans or other emergency payments. And a Thrivent survey shows almost 2 in 3 non-retirees are focused on their current personal finances rather than retirement. Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
SpaceX shares tumbled Friday, erasing more than $1 trillion in market value from the rocket and artificial intelligence giant's all-time high. The stock fell 5.4%, giving the company a market value of $1.63 trillion. The value stood at $2.64 trillion in its third day of trading last month. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Ed Kalegi. This is Bloomberg.
Thursday, it's a Bloomberg News exclusive.
The United Nations is crucial. It's a world of fragmentation, it's a world of tension.
For the first time in 10 years, the United Nations is set for a leadership change.
Trust in the organization is waning.
The candidates for Secretary General debate live from UN headquarters.
We are stronger when we stand together.
UN Town Hall, the next Secretary General. Thursday afternoon at 5 Eastern. Only on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Podcast Spotlight Hour on Bloomberg Radio.
Hey there, you're listening to The Deal with Alex Rodriguez and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio. I'm Jason Kelly, and today you're hearing a part of our conversation with two-time Olympic gold medalist and hockey star Hilary Knight. Hilary Knight joins us, truly one of the GOATs of the game of hockey. What a treat. We've watched you over the years. We watched you win a gold medal not that long ago now. Probably feels like a long time for you since so much has happened in the intervening time. So welcome to The Deal.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It feels like yesterday, right? The gold medal win.
Does it? Yeah, yeah. Does it wear off?
Sometimes, and then when I'm doing something athletic, I'm like, wow, I should kind of get back on the horse.
Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of the off season, I mean, it's such a fascinating time for professional hockey, especially women's professional hockey. It feels like that something really special and interesting is happening, finally, I dare say, with a professional women's hockey league. It's happening. So give us a sense of what it feels like on the inside and whether it does feel like, wow, okay, we're doing this, because you've been a part of this for a long time.
Yeah, well, I think first off, we just finished year 3, right? So we're very much so in the infancy and comparative to other professional leagues out there. And I know our salaries were recently published and people were like, oh my gosh, they're so low. And yeah, they are low, but they also are like a starting point for us to continue to build and grow and deepen our CBA when that becomes available to renegotiate. But yeah, I think for so long we craved investment and we needed a structure of investment and a vehicle to get us to that sustainability level. And we found that in the Mark and Kimbra Walter group. And it's been phenomenal to see where professional hockey has grown in such a short amount of time.
All right, so let's jump right in there, because I know Alex and I both have a lot of questions about that deal. That is the deal that sort of sets this all in motion. We were fortunate to have Billie Jean and Alana on our show. It's now a couple years ago, and they were talking about sort of the development of that. And keep me honest on the history here. You and some other star players had essentially said, we're not playing until we have real confidence that there is a sustainable financial investment into this league. How did Mark and his family and Billie Jean and Alana ultimately, how did they convince you that they were for real?
Yeah, well, honestly, and that's true. We sort of embarked on something called the Dream Gap Tour, which we sort of curated an experience for the players to give them resources, some sort of training stipend to continue that programming so people wouldn't be left without or absent from playing games because, you know, we have to continue that development piece. So we embarked on the Dream Gap Tour for a handful of years. COVID hit. We were able to float ourselves. And honestly, Billie Jean King and Alana Kloss brokering that deal and getting us in the right rooms to find the right vehicle. And the whole foundation of the conversation was we want to provide a professional experience to the players. And that's something that we lacked for forever, right? I think if we're looking back and reflecting, we really had a lot of semi-pro leagues and a lot of just one-off sort of endorsements or trying to capitalize on a moment versus strategic investing. And so when we had those conversations, I think at first we were a little apprehensive because the hockey world is very insular and different, right? There's a lot of nuances to the sport, and to have an investor that doesn't necessarily know that world right off the hop, we're like, oh my gosh, how is this going to work out? But to have advisors and guidance from Billie Jean King, and she's been through it many different times before, and then also the promise that we're going to provide a professional league and we're going to give it enough gas and enough legs to be able to carry itself for many, many years was extremely exciting for us.
Yeah, Billie Jean and Alana are just incredible. They're forces of nature, and they work so well together. Going to Mark Walter, who's a partner, he's a governor in the NBA. When you see what Mark Walter's built at Guggenheim in like 25 years, it's incredible. Then he goes to the Dodgers and takes them from basically bankruptcy to the greatest franchise in the sport. And now he's bought the Lakers for $10 billion. Everything he touches turns into gold. But when Alana and Billie Jean put you in the room with Mark, what was it about Mark that impressed you, that you said, this is the right person for us, or the right group for us to follow?
Yeah, I think just the authenticity of the promise, right? And knowing someone who's done it before and having that experience with the MLS, like previously, when it's a very, very much so a startup league, right? And being able to move, I guess, in a non-traditional way, while also having inlays that were traditional from his sports experience and other backgrounds, was really exciting. So it was sort of this like 1-2 punch approach that we could really be dynamic in the spaces that we wanted to move in, the doors that needed to be open, and obviously a massive strategic investment to be able to give these things wings. And yeah, it's crazy to see the growth in such a short amount of time. And I think just like as a player, when you're in it and you're so close to it, we're expanding this year, another few teams, right? It's like, what are we doing? But we're already going to be at 12. Like, that's insane. So it just goes to show the promise and the commitment that this group has and where they want to take the sport, which is incredible.
And so when you go into that room, Hillary, what are you asking for specifically? Like, you've seen what doesn't work. And so what are the key components to the business from a player's perspective?
Yeah, and the simple answer is everything, right? We did not have really any structure to be able to support ourselves outside of what we were doing with our existing partnerships. And it wasn't enough money to give us the length and the depth that we needed. And so for many years, and we still don't necessarily have spaces that are created for us quite yet. So that's what's exciting with expansion. It's like, how close are we to breaking ground on our own practice facility, or where are we plugging in to, some of these major arenas and venues? So that's super exciting. But yeah, I mean, I think health insurance was a huge starting point for us. Some sort of wage that, livable, right? That people could make a career out of, because we had such a big drop off. If you weren't on any of the national teams after college, it's like, what do I do now? So we're losing a ton of talent. And then just all the things that go into one professional athlete being successful, right? Like, we're talking medical, business ops, hockey ops, the marketing structures, you name it. It really was this whole puzzle piece that we were able to put together.
Yeah, and just following up on what Jason just said, Hillary, like, when you're in these rooms, you're in like the top tier of like intelligence, people that can actually grow a business and scale it across the planet. But people don't know you won 2 titles at Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, and then you got your MBA. When you think about your MBA, how much comfort does that bring to you that you're in a room like this, that you can actually handle yourself the way you have so beautifully?
I think, honestly, between the MBA and just being on a team sport and being around team sports, like, I felt really prepared because we were with so many amazing people, and you really figure out whose strengths you're relying on and what you can bring to the table and how you tap into those individual strengths and then collective strengths. But I would say going back to school was good because I understood a little bit more of the lingo, and that's where I think I was a little bit excited about the law piece, because that's a completely different kind of jargon in itself. itself. So it was a really eye-opening experience and a really good personal growth experience as well to just learn from these amazing people. But I think the biggest thing at the end of the day is you think you're just an athlete, right? And you're like, it's sort of that imposter system. You're like, what am I doing over here? And then you quickly realize like how many of those skills that you learn in sport are life skills and so applicable to not only just life, but, any industry in general. And so that was really exciting to experience that.
Oh boy, she just hit a key square in the Alex Rodriguez bingo card. Imposter syndrome. Alex, you've had these exact same experiences when you go into these rooms, right?
Oh yeah, and somebody that came on our podcast, Steve Young, who we both love and admire so much, he talked about it, and he's reached the pinnacle both in the football field with titles and Super Bowls, and he's also part of a almost a $10 billion private equity fund, and he's a partner. And to this day, and I believe Steve is now north of 60, he's still experiencing it, but it's okay to talk about it because that's how you kind of get past that moment. So I love that you said that.
So Hillary, take us into the more recent past where you're going from negotiating for health insurance and within a matter of a couple of years, you're playing in front of a sold out crowd at Madison Square Garden, like the world's most famous arena. We're all familiar. Like, what are the 2 or 3 things that provide that level of jump?
Yeah. Well, one, I think having the best product, right? I think at the end of the day, like you're selling a product and that's your players and you want to showcase them at the best of their ability and you need to provide those things and those resources to continue to evolve, whether it's your superstars or your depth players. So I think they've done a tremendous job of being able to plug away at that. But then also, I think one of the smartest things, and I know it's a little bit different up in Canada, but because hockey is still very much growing in the United States, providing a free live stream that is like a cable level quality and caliber to fans so we can get introduced to new fans and also continue to secure sort of those fan bases that have always existed but now can exist consistently, and they know where to go and they know where to find the best players sort of in the world, duking it out night in and night out. So those were the 2 things top of mind. But there's so many things that go into supporting us on this stage. And if you look like year 1, we're kind of figuring it out, right? Like we're disrupting our own industry. And then year 2, we kind of have a good feel and a sense of that. And then knowing it's an Olympic year 2 and how many more eyeballs we can capture and continue that awesome momentum from the world's greatest spectacle and track them back to what we're doing was just a huge success point for the league. And I think that went well, as you saw at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah. So talk about the Olympic side of this, because, when I think about the success of, the NWSL, for instance, clearly there are a lot of parallels here, but that sort of stage and the exposure, for lack of a better term, that the Olympics provide. Tell us more about the Olympic experience, because you've got 2 gold medals under your belt. How does that translate for you, both as a player who wants to continue her professional career, but also as a business in and of yourself?
Yeah, I think they just shine a brighter spotlight on what we're doing. And there's this different type of fan that watches the Olympics.
Stay tuned for more of our interview with Hillary Knight. You're listening to The Deal with Alex Rodriguez and Jason Kelly right here on Bloomberg Radio.
And I'm Ed Kalegi in the Bloomberg Newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. Iran has unleashed heavy attacks on Gulf neighbors in retaliation for the latest U.S. strikes, as Tehran said it was suspending its commitments under the interim peace deal. Kuwait suffered one of its heaviest barrages since the Middle East conflict began in late February, including its airport and an oil facility, triggering multiple rounds of sirens from around dawn on Saturday. Iran also struck Jordan and Qatar, all sites of U.S. military installations installations. Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Qasem Garibabadi said the deal crafted under Pakistani mediation, a 60-day ceasefire while the U.S. and Iran negotiated terms for reopening the Strait of Hormuz and curtailing Iran's nuclear program, had been effectively abandoned. Russia and Ukraine also exchanged fresh airstrikes overnight, with Moscow hitting Ukrainian ports and Kyiv targeting several Russian regions with drones. The strikes damaged warehouses operated by major online retailers and set a fuel depot on fire. New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani says he's in active conversation with the city's law department on whether he has the authority to detain Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Bloomberg's Monica Ricks explains.
New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani says his administration is discussing the possible arrest of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for war crimes in Gaza if Netanyahu comes to New York for the UN's General Assembly in September.
Prime Minister Netanyahu belongs in The Hague.
He talked about it with the New York Times.
We're not talking about a personal assessment of Benjamin Netanyahu. We're talking about the International Criminal Court and the fact that they have a warrant out for this prime minister's arrest.
Mamdani and the UN have called Netanyahu's actions in Gaza a genocide. But Netanyahu says he's not concerned, accusing the mayor in a recent radio interview of supporting Hamas. Monica Ricks, Bloomberg Radio.
Republican Representative Ralph Norman says he will run for South Carolina's open Senate seat, setting up a potential primary contest with the late Senator Lindsey Graham's sister. President Trump endorsed Darlene Graham, who took over the Senate seat this week after her brother's death. Other South Carolina Republicans are also considering a bid, including Representatives Nancy Mace and Russell Fry, as well as Lieutenant Governor Pamela Yvette. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Ed Kalegi, and this is Bloomberg.
On a recent edition of the Big Take podcast, inflation is cooling. Why are Americans still sweating? Host Sarah Holder speaks with Bloomberg's Reed Pickard about what the data does and doesn't tell us about the state of the U.S. economy.
Inflation is not rising, but it's still at 3.5% annually, which is above the Fed's annual target of 2%. How do you read that overall inflation rate?
Inflation is too high right now. And when it comes to what Americans are experiencing, it's hard to make financial decisions when you don't know where prices are going. And I think all of this needs to also be in the context of the news moment that we're in right now with the war. This sharp decline was when there was an interim deal between the U.S. and Iran, and July has totally shook up that picture. So we're back to oil prices rising. We've started to see gasoline prices start ticking up again. And this uncertainty on the outlook is just still hovering here.
And Reed, let's turn now to jobs. We saw jobless claims fall modestly this week. The U.S. labor market has been kind of a confusing place over the past year. It's been described as unexpectedly resilient. Hiring has been slow, but the unemployment rate has also been slowly dropping. So what do the latest jobs numbers add to this picture?
What the latest jobs report showed us was that June hiring was about half of what economists had expected. And it wasn't just that hiring was half, it was also that the prior month's blockbuster report, while still good, was revised lower. So it took a little bit of the shine off of this excitement around momentum in the labor market.
That's what's on a recent edition of the Big Take podcast. Listen to the full episode on Apple, Spotify, the Bloomberg Business app, or anywhere you get your podcasts.
Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Podcast Spotlight Hour on Bloomberg Radio.
Hey there, you're listening to The Deal with Alex Rodriguez and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio. I'm Jason Kelly, and today you're hearing a part of our conversation with two-time Olympic gold medalist and hockey star Hilary Knight.
So, Hilary, talking now as governor of the WNBA team, the Minnesota Lynx, and seeing all the momentum you've experienced. I mean, literally, you've had a shotgun seat. Like, you've been watching this firsthand from the CBA collective bargaining agreement to starting a new league to being one of the best players in the world. What advice would you give my partners and I as far as continue to build the WNBA, whether it's sponsorship, what should we be telling our TV partners? What should we be doing with ticketing, partnerships? Overall, what advice would you give us?
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily a moment, but a momentum piece, right? And that investment has to be strategic and authentic. And I think the biggest and the coolest thing about just women's sports in specific, if we put them in a silo, is the storytelling piece. And I think that's what's disruptive about them. And that's what gets fans even more engaged and involved, not only in the business side, but also a personal player side as well. And so that's what's been really exciting to see. So I'd say just authentic storytelling and starting there and figuring out how those partnerships really elevate the product, but then also the players' massive storylines that they can bring in. Because at the end of the day, we're all entertainers, right? And so I'm tuning in to watch that because I know about sort of the back end of what's going on. And that's exciting to me. And I want to see how everything unplays. And I think now just with, the way broadcast and streams are going, sports are such a massive and interesting thing to tune into, right? So it's really exciting to see the sports space evolve.
All right. Well, speaking of viewership, it would not be a hockey conversation if we didn't talk about probably the biggest storyline in hockey, men's or women's, over the past couple years, which is heated rivalry. Heard of it. So, I mean, one of the fascinating things, Hillary, that we saw with that is something that you sort of alluded to this, which is sports is this kind of like cultural common language. And this notion that, sports and culture, I mean, it's sort of the basis of this entire show, sports, business, and culture. But with something like heated rivalry, like it pushes hockey into the zeitgeist and sort of the everyday conversation in a way that it hadn't been, at least for a time. Is there a way to capitalize on that sort of interest that, people are just talking about hockey in general? And what do you make of that whole phenomenon?
Yeah, I think it was probably one of the best things to happen to the sport in general, if I'm just going to blanket statement, because I think sometimes I'm looking at the sport and I think we're a little bit behind the times, right? And I think it's wonderful to continue to have conversations and create more spaces for all sorts of different types of people who want to be fans of the sport that we all love, right? And I think heated rivalry was an awesome talking point and a great, easy way to jump into a conversation that people might feel scared about having a conversation about queer community, right? And intersectionality of hockey, because, we want to create these safer spaces and, it is a very insulated culture at times. And so I think it was great to kind of open the door and shine a little bit of light in different areas and continue that dialogue. And also, I mean, it's an entertainment piece. I mean, it's awesome.
Totally.
We rarely get great hockey movies. So I think we're all fans whenever a hockey entertainment piece comes out and you're like, okay. And by the way, I will sort of as an aside, when I met Connor Story in person, I was like, hey, where's the Russian accent? Like, that's how good this guy was, right?
Yeah,
It's like, what's going on? So yeah, it's funny you bring this up because I actually just, a jersey arrived this morning from those guys.
Way.
So that was pretty cool. Yeah.
So Hillary and Jason, recently I was reading this article and it was predicting that by the year 2040, all the sports teams, the franchises, are going to be some of the biggest production companies in the world, which to your point about sports being the great AI trade, but also experiences, what's happening in New York right now, it's like mind-blowing.
With the Knicks.
It's all stories that we want more and more and more of, and we just can't get enough. So I think your forecast is spot on.
And so, Hillary, but sort of putting some of those things together, I mean, you are the face of the sport. I'm not saying that as just to flatter you. It's true. I mean, you're the most famous player in your game. And so with that comes a certain measure of responsibility, which clearly you exercised in getting this league started. What's the next thing that you think you can do? And maybe it is on the storytelling front or the media front or whatever that may be. What's something you can do, especially while we're going to talk about what you do after you play in a minute, but while you're still playing, what are the things that you feel like you can do to keep the sport front of mind?
Yeah, I think honestly just imparting what I've learned on younger players and getting them to a level where they're comfortable to be their own advocate and they're comfortable pushing the envelope and continue to ask questions and sort of disrupt the space as we go along, because I think that's a very healthy growth. And I think we're going to need, these young, bright minds to challenge things in a very constructive way to continue to push the sport forward and also get what they've earned along the way, right? And so that's something I think that's top of mind right now for me, is that education piece. But yeah, it's exciting. I feel like the doors are wide open of, what's the next thing that I can do in the sport? And I'm sort of sifting through what I want to do because I love building, and I think I have a gift to be able to kind of see what's coming along and figuring out what problem I can solve for the future. And that's super exciting to me.
So Hillary, I think you have a lot of gifts, and I think Jason, she reminds me of our mutual friend Grant Hill. And Grant Hill is a Hall of Fame basketball player, Hillary, who went to Duke, had a Hall of Fame basketball career. Now is an owner of team sports, multiple. Also is a top guy in TV, one of the top guys in TV. Like he has a real estate empire. So I think your challenge is going to be, you'll be pulled in so many directions with so many opportunities. But I think if I can just ask you this one question, in a dream world, what would Hillary and I be doing in 5 years? And you can wear multiple hats.
Well, honestly, I love the sport. I want to stay in the sport as much as possible. And so when I look at, maybe this is more than a 5-year plan, but I would love to put together an all women's ownership group and grab one of these teams whenever they do get spun off and are available for sale, because I believe in the product. I believe in the players so much, and I want to give them the world, and I want to scale this thing and, be able to grow. But yeah, that would be, I think, sort of the first thing that comes top of mind. But what's exciting about women's sports right now is anything you really enter into right now, you're building, you're in that phase. And that's super exciting to me.
For the record, as we were prepping for this, Hillary, before you came on, I said to Alex, I was like, I bet she wants to own a team. I was like, I know enough about her to know the ways that she thinks, and also like learning a little bit even before, we got on with you about, and again, like understanding from Billie Jean and Alana's perspective, sort of like how this all came about, and the idea that you and the other players sort of came in. I just think it's an incredible case study in I think players being partners from the beginning. And, Alex obviously has a very unique perspective on this, having sat on both sides of the table. But, when a player is considered a partner from the outset and doesn't have to sort of fight from behind to get to that stature, I would imagine it really changes the dynamic. Is that fair? Does it feel like that in your league right now?
Definitely. And at times there's that healthy, like, what's going on, right? Like we're battling it out. But no, I think, and I could be mistaken, but I think we're the first league to launch with a CBA in place.
Yes.
So that's historic in itself. And I think that just goes to show the promise of this ownership group. And, understand, like, sports business will evolve and it'll become what it will be. But, right from the hop, they were really interested in getting this right. And they continue to be that way, which is exciting.
Well, and Alex, and I think you remember this, sorry to just jump in on this, because I think it's a really important point, and Hillary alluded to it a second ago, which is one of the really kind of radical decisions that was made early on was that Mark and Kimbra basically said, we're going to own the league. Like, we're going to own all the teams. We're not going to sell the franchises at the outset. We want to make sure that this is economically viable and sustainable. So we're going to own the whole thing, and then sort of get to the point where I've got that right, Hillary? That's sort of the
owner.
next turn, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, it definitely has like challenges, right? When you think about a single owner versus like multiple, and both ways you can cut it either way, right? And so I think what's really cool is they see this as a massive investment, and there's a whole structure behind it. And it's not just, we're just going to write a check and then we're going to sell it off to here and then hope for the best. And so there are protections in place to make sure that this thing does have the right structure to be here forever. And that's exciting.
Yeah. So, Jason, permission to give Hillary a little bit of an idea? Hillary, am I cool with that?
Do it.
Let's go.
Deals on the deal. Deals on the
very
deal. Let's
bullish
do
on
it.
you. I love it. So I'm very bullish on your career, past career, future career. And I've been a big fan since around COVID of all the things you've been doing. I kind of came familiar with you. But here's the idea. I think you create night sports. Okay. You like it so far?
Okay.
You go out and raise $250 million. Okay. You first, once your league is viable and it becomes economic, sustainable, you can invest in a handful of teams. There's examples in other sports like Arctos and Dio that have done this, but specifically for women's sports. And then after you do hockey, you can go to softball, you can go to women's soccer, and you can be involved helping multiple teams find their dream. What do you think?
I love it.
There you go.
I love it.
All
There
right,
you go.
done. To sort of put a bow on this, one of the things that really excited me about talking to you was that we did have this initial conversation about your league with Billie Jean and Alana. And so can you give us like a Billie Jean King story? It's like give us one Billie Jean King story from this process, because she's also like one of one in terms of her personality and her approach. You must have a good one.
Okay. I hope this isn't underwhelming, because the Blackhawks hosted us like years ago, and Billie Jean King, I don't think ever had a hockey stick in her hand. And they're like, will you do the shot from center ice? And in front of a nearly sold out crowd at the United Center, she nailed it.
No way.
My God. Come
Nailed
on.
it.
Thanks so much for listening to just part of our conversation with Hillary Knight. You're listening to The Deal with Alex Rodriguez and Jason Kelly, and you can hear the full conversation and more episodes by subscribing to The Deal wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
This is your 24-hour source for world markets and breaking business news. Bloomberg Radio. Coming up, the latest market-moving headlines from Bloomberg. First, an update from our partners at ABC News.
ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson. The war with Iran claims more American lives. 2 service members were killed yesterday in Iranian drone and missile attacks in Jordan, and a third is missing, says the U.S. military. 16 American troops have died in the war. Winds still carrying smoke from wildfires in Canada and Minnesota to many states. ABC's Clara McMichael.
We're not free of the smoke yet. Over the next few days, airlines are putting in place some travel advisories. So if you want to change your flight and avoid a potential delay, you can do that without some of those change fees.
Cleanup efforts where Guadalupe River flooding hit Texas towns. In Kirk County, Megan Booth says her family-run boutique suffered damage for the second year in a row.
We just wanted to kind of move on, and here we are again.
Source of the stomach bug affecting thousands has been traced to iceberg lettuce in Mexico and a supplier to Taco Bell's in 5 states. Taco Bell pulling lettuce from its restaurants nationwide. This is ABC News.
And I'm Ed Kalegi in the Bloomberg Newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. Apple and the U.S. Justice Department are in early talks about settling a 2024 antitrust case. We get more from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Sources tell Bloomberg the discussions are active. However, there is no guarantee that the two sides will reach an agreement. They say the iPhone maker has made multiple offers this year to the Justice Department to bring the case to a close. Meanwhile, Friday, Apple briefly topped Nvidia to become the world's most valuable company, but Nvidia regained the crown by the closing bell, ending just ahead of Apple in terms of market cap. Apple shares are now at a 52-week high and just below a record in New York. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Mexico's top diplomat says its trade pact with the U.S. and Canada should be completed later this year. Bloomberg's Monica Ricks has details.
Mexico's ambassador to Washington, Roberto Lazari, says the U.S., Mexico, and Canada need to accelerate trade talks to give investors more certainty and preserve the region's competitive advantages.
The baseline for us is that we have a 10-year agreement.
But he tells Bloomberg any delay could amount to an economic hit.
Every moment that we're losing, I think we're losing competitiveness, market share, and investment. So it's in the best interest of all the three of us to get to a position of resolution soon.
The USMCA covers roughly $2 trillion in trade, and without any major changes or exits, could remain in place till 2036. Monica Ricks, Bloomberg Radio.
Rising living costs are making it tougher to save for retirement. That's the finding of 3 reports out this week. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager has the details.
A survey from NFP finds 46% of working adults are deprioritizing or just not saving because they got to take care of housing, car payments, or health care first. 27% of respondents to a Schroeder survey say they've cut back or even borrowed from workplace retirement accounts to take care of loans or other emergency payments. And a Thrivent survey shows almost 2 in 3 non-retirees are focused on their current personal finances rather than retirement. Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
SpaceX shares tumbled Friday, erasing more than $1 trillion in market value from the rocket and artificial intelligence giant's all-time high. The stock fell 5.4%, giving the company a market value of $1.63 trillion. The value stood at $2.64 trillion in its 3rd day of trading last month. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Ed Kalegi. This is Bloomberg.
Find your next adventure with a brand new Kia from King's Kia. Right now, get 0% APR financing for 48 months on new 2026 Kia Sportage and Sorento models. Visit kingskia.com today. 0% APR financing for 48 months at $20.83 per month per thousand finance on new 2026 Kia Sportage and Sorento models. Not all buyers will qualify for Kia Finance America. Offer ends 8/3. See dealer for full details.
Bloomberg Hot Pursuit, a weekly podcast that gives car lovers the inside look they crave.
We're going to talk about the EV backlash
with Matt Miller in New York and Hannah Elliott in LA.
If you want very futuristic technology, you go to Mercedes.
Listen for the latest trends, new car releases, and anything else that drives us.
Hannah's growing Corvette collection.
The electric Macan is out.
Bloomberg Hot Pursuit. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app and anywhere you get your podcasts.
Stay connected with Bloomberg wherever you are with Bloomberg Podcasts. On the Big Take Asia, Xi Jinping loves soccer, so why is China's team so bad? On Emerging, can India win the AI race without its own open AI? And on Odd Lots, New York State Governor Kathy Hochul on her 1-year data center moratorium. Listen to Bloomberg Podcasts on Apple, Spotify, the Bloomberg Business app, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Bloomberg Podcasts. Context changes everything.
Follow the money in the world of sports on the Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast. From media and technology,
streamers are going big on live sports,
to billion-dollar deals.
Get ready for the 2026 FIFA World Cup.
Bloomberg Business of Sports with Michael Barr, Vanessa Perdomo, and Randall Williams.
Sports valuations are rising. We'll see when they peak.
Listen on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app or anywhere you get your podcasts. Bloomberg Podcasts. Context changes everything.
Hi, I'm David Weston. Join me every week for the Wall Street Week podcast to hear stories of capitalism from around the world, from geopolitical tensions and central bank decisions to artificial intelligence, energy, and infrastructure. We sit down with the CEOs, economists, policymakers, and thought leaders whose decisions are shaping markets everywhere we find them. Subscribe to the Wall Street Week podcast on Apple, Spotify, or anywhere you listen.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Michael's, the once struggling arts and crafts chain, has gotten its groove back.
And today we're going to make a set of holiday cards with matching tags.
Today, we will be making a donut hole.
So how did that happen? Well, the private equity-owned store with over 1,300 locations in the U.S. was able to take advantage of 2 other chains that went bankrupt last year, buying their brands and intellectual property.
And very quickly, you would see sort of the inventory from Joann's and Party City line the shelves of Michael's, such as like the balloons, or you see the sewing machines.
That's Michelle Chang, credit reporter at Bloomberg, who notes that Michael still has a lot of competition out there.
We're talking Hobby Lobby, we're talking Amazon, we're talking Walmart. So one thing they're trying to compete with them is like offering more items to customers.
And even as those shelves fill up, Michael's is offsetting the Trump tariffs by sourcing more supplies from outside China. Tom Busby, Bloomberg Radio.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest Balance of Power podcast, we talk with Elon Goldenberg from J Street as the U.S. escalates the war with Iran.
We are really back to the beginning in many ways. What I argued for, and I did spend years looking at different scenarios and planning for these possibilities at the Pentagon. And when we really looked at what happens at the end of a war with Iran or how it goes, our most central conclusion was essentially this ends up looking a lot like the first Iraq War, going back to the early 1990s, where at the end of it, you're going to have a wounded regime, but it's still there. In some ways, it's weaker, but in many other ways, it's angrier. And then you're just in a new normal where you have instability and bouts of violence, and a war starts every few weeks, or small wars, and maybe it's not full war. Just this is the new normal. And that's absolutely what we're doing. But actually, the one thing I'll say is it's actually a lot worse than what I'd even predicted, because the one big difference is Iran has a lot more leverage over the Strait of Hormuz and has been able to grab that leverage as a result of this war that none of us really anticipated was going to be as effective. We thought they'd be able to try and close it and use it as a tool, but their ability to sustain that leverage and control of it over time has really been a wild card and has made things even worse. So I thought this was a terrible idea from the start. That's what I wrote at the very beginning of the war, for precisely these reasons, that there's no positive way to end this in a way that works for the United States. But it really has turned out to be even worse than I thought it would be.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Balance of Power podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com. Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Podcast Spotlight Hour on Bloomberg Radio.
You're listening to Bloomberg Wealth with me, David Rubenstein. On today's show, I'm speaking with Greg Fleming, President and CEO of Rockefeller Capital Management. So why do families need specialized advice? If they made a lot of money, presumably they know how to make money, so why do they need you to help them make even more money?
Well, families, and you know this, David, if they're built the wealth through building a business in something else, and our families have businesses that they built in so many different industries across the United States. It's really a remarkable country and economy with the pockets of wealth in so many different places. The expertise was in the business that they built. They're not as affluent most of the time on what they do with the wealth and how they preserve the wealth and how they plan for the wealth and how they invest the wealth. That's what we're there for. We really are there to take care of all of the needs, and they can become quite complex. Our families are multi-generational, and maybe the business is still ongoing, or maybe they've sold the business and they're just trying to figure out how to have the wealth stretch for generations. And that's not where their expertise is. That's where our expertise is.
And do you find that families that are wealthy, they spend a lot of time planning to give away the money upon the death of the founder or the co-founders, or do they actually give it away before the co-founder or founders die?
I think it's more the latter, that families give a lot of money away along the way before the founder or co-founder dies. I think it's the most philanthropic country in the world. We worked with somebody recently who won a lottery. One of the first things they were focused on wasn't just how to spend the money, but how to give some of it back. It's a distinctly American notion that philanthropy should be part of wealth creation. We help many families set up a foundation, to make sure that it gets done in the way that the family wants, with the causes they care most about. So it's a huge part of almost every single family we work with.
Now, the Rockefeller & Co., which you bought, in what year did you buy it?
2018. We closed on March 1, 2018.
Okay. At that time, the family decided to sell. Why did they sell Rockefeller & Co., or part of it?
They sold part of it. Remember, they stayed in, and that was something that we were very focused on. We wanted to build it with the family, and they're quite pleased with what we've done with it. They have an incredible name, and we've really been privileged to build this company in their name. But they wanted to modernize it, expand it, build world-class technology, create something that could endure going forward, and that's why they sold a significant part of it.
So when you bought a significant part, you were backed by Viking, is that correct?
Yes, Viking Global Investor. The founder, Andreas Halvorsen, is still in charge and still runs Viking, and Brian Kaufman runs the private investment side. They've been a terrific partner of ours, and I really picked Viking because I was quite pleased with the way they thought about building a business the right way over the long term.
So after you bought it at a certain price, you and Viking controlled the company. The Rockefellers were still in. And then a number of years later, a number of other investors came in. Did you ever publicly say what you paid for the company when you bought it?
We didn't publicly say what the price was when we bought it, but we bought it with $18 billion in client assets, and our client assets today are over $200 billion. So we've grown the value of the company quite significantly.
So the inevitable question is, are you going to take the company public?
You know, in the final analysis, I'm a fiduciary, as always, to the shareholders. Building this company is one of the great things in my career that I'm proud of. But we don't need the capital that would come with an IPO, which is, a lot of the reason why people do IPOs. We just finished the recapitalization in December. We have a very happy set of shareholders, old and new. They invested knowing that the best way to continue to build this business is for the long run. And I think they're comfortable with the company being private in the long run. That's the preferred route.
Are most of your clients in Americans? Is that what you focus on, America?
Overwhelming percentage, yes.
Okay. And have you thought about moving to Asia or Europe?
We've had many conversations, people coming to us, opportunities. The name carries well. The Rockefellers, the footprint is not just in this country, it's in Europe. The wealth creation in this country, David, continues to be, frankly staggering. And the number of families that we can serve in this country and the number of places. Now, there are these growth cities in this country where there's a tremendous amount of wealth being created, and we like to be on the ground in these cities with our private advisor teams, close to the families, close to the clients. So there's been such a significant opportunity here, we've stayed focused on the U.S.
Well, suppose I say I watch this show and I've heard about your firm, but I don't know if I'm wealthy enough to be eligible. How much net worth does somebody need to qualify to be have their money managed by you?
We don't dictate to the private advisor teams a minimum. The sweet spot is probably 20 to 25 on up to 250, 500 million, and we take care of many families that have more than $1 billion.
Let's suppose I say I've got $50 million, I inherited $50 million. I don't know anything about money. I'm something in the non-financial world, but I want to not lose my $50 million. If I give it to you and you manage it, what kind of rate of return can somebody realistically expect from a money manager like Rockefeller?
Well, remember, we're primarily on the wealth management side, so it's open architecture. We're providing the advice on which investments to go into. Most of our clients we help put into third-party firms that are on our investment platform, and we do a lot of diligence on making sure that we bring in the best outside firms for every single micro strategy you can think about. We're trying to put them in the best possible position. So if it's $50 million, it's preservation of wealth. The private advisor team will be working with them on a portfolio that might be more skewed on the fixed income side versus equities and alternatives. But we work backwards from the needs of the client and the family, and we emphasize open architecture and independent advice here.
Let's talk for a moment about the United States economy today, which obviously is important if you're in the money management world. Are you worried about the rate of inflation in this country?
I'm most focused on the fiscal situation in this country. I think that we're still at relatively full employment. We have been in a good time. We run these 5, 6, 7% of GDP deficits annually, and there seems to be no impetus to change that. It's approaching $40 trillion in debt. You're very familiar with all the different benchmarks. We spend more on interest than we do in defense, and that obviously could have rate implications over time. It's a fantastic amount of money to have borrowed, even for an economy this robust and this big. That does worry me, and that could feed into the inflation side. The specific inflation question, David, there's a couple things that make it a very complicated picture for Kevin Warsh as he steps into it at the Fed. The first is AI, which is being implemented everywhere. I mean, every private and public company is trying to figure out how to use the tools for greater productivity. And these large language model companies like Anthropic are working with a lot of these companies, and it's moving faster than even I thought. That could have a depressing effect on prices. You could have a productivity pop coming out of that, and it could, make things cheaper as the agents start to be embedded in more companies. So he's got to look at that. Then he's now got an energy shock. So it's he's got an ongoing, significant fiscal deficit, which, clearly could put pressure on rates, particularly on the long end. So I think it's a complicated picture. It remains to be seen exactly how he starts to play this.
How do you think money management, or particularly your type of money management, will be affected by AI?
I think that the front end of our business, the client interface, because the work we do with families, there's a lot of complexity. You're dealing with the human beings. The front end will continue to be our private advisors and their teams. I think we can make them more efficient. And I have said before that if we have a private advisor today that has 20 clients with $100 million, 20 families he or she's taking care of, and 5 people on his team or her team, they could have 40 clients with $100 million, $4 billion of client assets, and 5 people on the team in 3 or 5 years. So I do think it's going to make our advisor teams more efficient, our whole firm more efficient. The great thing about being in a growth firm is that means that we can, hire fewer people, but we don't have to rationalize the way a lot of these big firms will have to do it.
So if you look in the future, what is your biggest worry about for the U.S. economy?
I worry about is the fact that we've got the most transformational technology that we've ever seen, you and I or anybody, in the form of AI. And it's going to affect every aspect of our lives in every single business, private or public. And my colleague Rashir Sharma reminds me that there's never been a breakthrough technology in history where more jobs weren't created rather than the ones that were lost. So net positive on jobs. And I think that ultimately that could be the case here, but we may have a transition where agents are able to do things before we have new jobs created. So I think the transition coming from artificial intelligence is likely more comprehensive and impactful than the country is yet ready for.
So let's suppose somebody is at Colgate now, a young professional, man or woman, and a young student, I should say, and wants to get into the financial service world. Why would they want to come into this business? And what are the skill sets that you look for when you're hiring young people?
I think it's a great business for a young person to get into because I think the client interface is fascinating. It's obviously about helping them take care of their wealth, and there's an analytical side to that, but there's the human side to helping take care of a family. And you get to, in our firm, you get to work with these wonderful families that are really some of the most successful American families. You get to know the story. You're helping them through something they're less familiar with, what to do with the wealth. The skill sets I always look for, David, I want the people who have the passion to go for excellence. But I also want to find the people that want to do that in a way where they work well with others.
Well, suppose somebody comes along, they're very smart, and they're a history major, or they're an English literature major. Do you just don't hire them, or do you take a look at them?
I always love liberal arts. I did major in economics, but I was at Colgate and I studied a lot of things. And I actually had an anthropology professor at Colgate who I am still in touch with to this day. He just recently retired. He had a big impact on me and opened my mind in so many different kinds of ways. I think liberal arts training is going to be more valuable in the world that we're moving into, because I think the AI tools and agents are going to do a lot of the specific things that you could teach in a more technical manner to human beings. Whereas the liberal arts skills, which are a lot about, the ability to deal with different things, different people, there's going to be a premium on those.
So let's suppose I say to you, you've had an incredible career, but you must have made some mistakes somewhere. What's your regret? Do you have any regret about anything you did in your career?
I regret having to sell Merrill Lynch. It was a great firm. The mix of businesses should have enabled it to survive that credit crisis, because the kind of exposure that we had on the fixed income side of that balance sheet wasn't core to what Merrill Lynch was. So, I regret that we got to that point, and I do sometimes think back to, could I have done things differently? I wasn't yet president when that position was put on. It didn't report to me, but could I have done more to try to have that company still be around today? Because it was a 94-year-old company when I sold it.
What are you most proud of having achieved in your career so far?
This firm, Rockefeller Capital Management, because we started with not a lot. We had 182 people. It was a very different firm, so many of those people are not here. We have some great people that were here in the beginning.
How many employees you have now?
Close to 1,700. We have a great culture. We talk about excellence in everything here, and there's a high bar. People reach for excellence. And one of my favorite quotations is Lombardi, who you'll remember, said in the 1960s when he was paraphrasing Aristotle, perfection is not attainable, but if we chase it, we might just catch excellence. We're trying to catch excellence here, but we focus on collaborative collegial culture. We want it to be a place where people love to work with others.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with RCM President and CEO Greg Fleming. To hear more conversations like this, head to Bloomberg.com or YouTube for the latest episodes of Bloomberg Wealth. I'm David Rubenstein, and this is Bloomberg.
Broadcasting 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. Powered by more than 3,000 journalists and analysts in over 100 bureaus around the world. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, an update from our partners at ABC News.
From ABC News, I'm Chuck Sievertson. The war with Iran claims more American lives, with a statement from the U.S. military coming out. ABC's Stephen Portnoy in Washington.
U.S. Central Command says the 2 service members were killed in Jordan as the U.S. defended against Iranian ballistic missiles and drones. A 3rd service member is said to be missing in action. 4 more were so badly wounded in yesterday's attacks they had to be medically evacuated to hospitals, but the military says they have since been discharged.
16 American troops have died in the war. Iran essentially agreeing with President Trump that their initial agreement and ceasefire are dead. It's still smoky and hazardous to breathe for millions in the Midwest and East because of the wind, carrying smoke from hundreds of wildfires in Canada and Minnesota. ABC's Clara McMichael.
Over the next few days, airlines are putting in place some travel advisories. So if you want to change your flight and avoid a potential delay, you can do that without some of those change fees. But more smoke is ahead. And so in the days to come, we could see more delays stack up because of that.
Some relief from Cleveland to the east where there are potentially bad storms. Cleanup efforts where Guadalupe River flooding hit Texas towns in Kerr County. Megan Booth says her family-run boutique was flood damaged for the 2nd year in a row.
We just never thought that this area would receive the type of flooding that it did. I mean, it's truly, I think I'm still in a little bit of shock.
A source of the stomach bug affecting thousands has been traced to iceberg lettuce in Mexico and a supplier to Taco Bells in 5 states, Indiana, Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and West Virginia. Taco Bell says it's pulled lettuce from its restaurants nationwide. A man charged in a case of alleged revenge porn has escaped custody in Houston. He was taken to a city hospital with a medical emergency, says the Liberty County Sheriff's Office, from where he bolted. Yorlan Reyes, Hispanic male, 31, last seen wearing an orange jail jumpsuit. You're listening to ABC News.
Now, Bloomberg Radio weather on SiriusXM 121.
Afternoon travel delays are a possibility to and from the Chicago area due to scattered showers and thunderstorms. The temperatures in Chicago near 90 this afternoon. Tampa, another spot where showers and thunderstorms may delay travelers. Temperatures in Tampa are going to be near 89 this afternoon. Watch for delays to and from Philadelphia due to scattered showers and thunderstorms this afternoon. Some of them may be strong. Temperatures near 87 in Philadelphia. Boston may have problems with late-day showers and storms. Temperatures in Boston, they're going to be up close to 85. If you're traveling to or from the Washington area, watch for showers and thunderstorms. Some could be quite strong. It's near 92 in Washington during the afternoon. Another area that may have problems with showers and thunderstorms would be Albany. Temperatures in Albany near 87. I'm Rob Carolyn, and that's your Bloomberg Travelers Forecast. Now back to the latest headlines from ABC News.
Lawmakers in Wisconsin are calling for Elon Musk to be charged under the state's election bribery laws after he offered $1 million payments to voters in last year's state Supreme Court election.
People rightfully feel that there's one standard for ordinary Wisconsinites and another one for billionaires. Public trust depends on proving that that is not true.
Green Bay State Rep Ahmad Rivera-Wagner said state elections administrators have referred Musk's case to prosecutors. He's moving to boost state bribery laws. Israeli air attacks in Gaza City have been increasing. Today, at least 9 Palestinians were killed, including 3 children, say officials at the local Shifa hospital. 6 others were wounded, some of them children. Israel's military says it targeted Hamas infrastructure and had located Hamas militants in the area. 2 families accusing a North Dakota hospital of sending 2 babies home with the wrong families 38 years ago. An at-home DNA test led Kyle Byland to a biological aunt on a genealogy platform. Byland and Jeremy Morrison were the only babies born on January 26, 1988 at Unity Med Center, Grafton, North Dakota. Byland.
Raising awareness for the incident itself, because for all we know, this is something that could have happened more than once.
The hospital says it's working to better understand what happened, but has uncovered no evidence that its administration or staff were responsible for the error. Chuck Sievertson, ABC News.
And I'm Ed Kalegi in the Bloomberg Newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. A losing week for the S&P 500 index, with chip stocks moving into a bear market. We get the story from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The SOX, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange Semiconductor Index, is now down 20% from a recent high, and that meets the definition of a bear market. Stocks finished the week lower. Semis dipped following the reveal of an AI model from a Chinese startup. The S&P 500 index was down 1.5% on the week, snapping 2 straight weeks of gains. The Dow fell for a second week, down 0.9%. NASDAQ this week down 2.9%. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Radio.
Meta is in early talks to lease computing power from its data centers to Anthropic. Experts say it is an opportunity for the social media giant to build a new business around its heavy investment in AI infrastructure. Senate efforts to pass a landmark cryptocurrency bill have hit a snag. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports from Washington.
Democratic negotiators have indicated they don't yet support the latest GOP framework of the Clarity Act. Democrats have voiced lingering reservations about the GOP's latest negotiating stance, signaling challenges for the bill, which Senator Adam Schiff says, quote, needs a lot of improvement, adding that the White House has backtracked on ethics provisions. Lawmakers have a limited time to review the legislation before the Senate goes on recess after August 7th. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Apple is in talks to settle a 2024 lawsuit with the U.S. Justice Department that claims the iPhone maker violated antitrust laws. The DOJ accused Apple of monopolizing the market for high-end smartphones, in part by blocking so-called super apps and discouraging outside messaging solutions. So far, the two sides have exchanged draft settlement materials, but there is no guarantee that they will reach an agreement. SpaceX shares tumbled on Friday, erasing more than $1 trillion in market value from the rocket and artificial intelligence giant's all-time high. On Friday, the stock fell 5.4%, giving the company a market value of $1.63 trillion. The value stood at $2.64 trillion in its third day of trading last month. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Ed Kalegi. This is Bloomberg.
Thursday, it's a Bloomberg News exclusive.
The United Nations is crucial. It's a world of fragmentation, it's a world of tension.
For the first time in 10 years, the United Nations is set for a leadership change.
Trust in the organization is waning.
The candidates for Secretary General debate, live from UN headquarters.
We are stronger when we stand together.
UN Town Hall, the next Secretary General. Thursday afternoon at 5 Eastern. Only on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app.
This is Wall Street Week. I'm David Weston, bringing you stories of capitalism. President Trump wants to build what he calls a golden fleet to transform the U.S. Navy. What will it take to get it done? Are U.S. shipbuilders up to the task? And can the government stay the course this time? Plus, it's one thing to charge $166 billion in tariffs. It's quite another to give it all back. The continuing saga of President Trump's IEEPA tariffs and whether Humpty Dumpty can ever really be put back together again. And Blair Efron of Centerview Partners takes us through what the AI rush is doing to American companies and the deals they are trying to make. Is there anything left for the rest of us? But we start with the global concern over inflation in a week that gave us new CPI numbers and Chair Warsh's first testimony on Capitol Hill. Are we facing higher long-term interest rates? How much of it comes from that AI rush? And what does it mean for Western economies if we can't get back to that magical 2% target? Loretta Mester was president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland and now holds positions at both Penn's Wharton School and Princeton. We got new inflation numbers out this week, which were not as bad as they had been in the past. But there has been a growing concern, I think, about longer-term inflation. Where are we?
Well, inflation's been above the 2% goal of the Fed for over 5 years. So we do have an inflation problem. I think it remains to be seen whether where interest rates are today are enough, right, to actually move inflation back down. I think the question that FOMC is going to have to ask itself is, do we need to raise interest rates a bit in order to add restrictiveness to the economy to bring inflation down? And I think they don't know that yet. I think the tone is getting more that we're impatient with this inflation. But I think they're going to wait for some more data before they make up their mind that they're going to need to raise rates. I think there's a good case for saying we need higher interest rates, because it's hard to argue that where we are today is very restrictive on the economy.
And particularly maybe because the headline number came down really largely because of fuel. Really,
yeah, that's right. I would say, though, that overall the report was a pretty good report, even when you look at the components. I mean, one of the things that have been, I think, troubling me is if you look at core services excluding housing, and I think that's a key indicator to look at, that's been moving up, right? We had the inflation coming down last year. Even before the war in Iran, we saw that indicator, the services component excluding housing, starting to move back up. And I think that's got to be a concern for the FOMC. You know, they've been forecasting inflation is going to come down, and even without oil prices pushing it back up, you still see that inflation's been pretty sticky.
And so it raises the question for some of us, why? I mean, it's good to have the numbers, know where the numbers are, but then you want to know what is really driving that, because you have some sense of where it's going to go next.
Well, I think that's the question about how restrictive really is policy, right? Monetary policy is what's going to determine whether demand is outpacing supply and therefore putting upward pressure on prices, or, right, whether it's restricted enough and it's going to bring demand more into balance with supply.
The one place where we know demand is up is in AI and all that comes with it. All the investments being made are really, to me at least, stunning. Does that in and of itself suggest that we probably are going to have continued inflation pressure for the foreseeable future?
Well, you certainly see prices for components that go into AI being elevated, and that is a source of pressure, upward pressure on inflation. I think the question, and this is something that the new chair, Kevin Warsh, has been talking about, is eventually he believes that AI will increase productivity enough that it becomes sort of a disinflationary force. I don't think the timing really suggests that we're going to get there soon. I do think right now it's an inflationary issue, and the question is how long will that last, and whether, again, that'll feed into other parts of the inflation and the consumption basket and therefore become a more of a broader inflation problem.
And this week we had not just the CPI numbers, but also Chair Warsh with his first appearance on Capitol Hill, where, to my hearing, said we really are serious about this inflation. And he recognized what you said, which is we've had it over 2% for a long time now. We've got to do something about that. At the same time, maybe, as you said, eventually it might come back down. How does he balance those two things? And how long is eventually?
Well, this is always a question for the Fed. And certainly, I think it was great that he reiterated the commitment that the FOMC and the Fed has to 2% price stability. I would say, as someone who was at the Fed, right, we were always committed to the 2% inflation target. That's not, and price stability and maximum employment, which are the goals that we've been given by Congress. So that isn't new. And the real question is, in making those trade-offs between the two goals, when there are trade-offs, right, and I think they're going to have to take seriously whether their policy rate right now is in the right place or whether they're going to have to recalibrate that a bit higher to get inflation down.
As you say, there's a dual mandate. It's both about price stability as well as employment. Does the nature of the employment situation in the United States right now actually give the Fed, if they wanted to use it, some room to raise rates some?
Well, you know, if you look at the labor market, it's an interesting labor market in the sense that it does appear to be pretty steady and in balance. I think what troubles people is when you look at the rate of payroll employment growth, it's much slower than it had been in the past, right? It used to be that you'd say to keep the unemployment rate stable, you would need 150,000 jobs added per month. Now, right, that number is much lower, right? Many estimates are between 50 and 70,000 a month. So that's quite a bit lower. And that's because the supply side of the labor market has changed so much. So you don't need as much hiring to keep supply and demand in balance. So there's a lot of concern about the labor market in terms of those lower growth numbers, but actually it's been a pretty stable, and the unemployment rate itself is low. That doesn't mean that there aren't problems in the labor market in terms of different aspects of it. As probably you know from, and your listeners know, right, young college graduates have had to struggle to get jobs. Part of it may be AI, part of it may be uncertainty about the economy, but a lot of what's happening in the labor market is on the supply side, not on the demand sides. And so, yes, if the key concern right now in the economy is the inflation part of the mandate, not the labor side.
You mentioned the various task force, 5, I think there are, that Chair Warsh has named to deal with various aspects. I suppose it's sort of to be expected that when somebody comes in, they want to take a fresh look at things. Were you surprised at how quickly and how extensively he's looking at some basic things at the Fed?
Well, not really, because, he was very vocal before he became chair about some of the things that he thought could be rethought. Right. And so if you look at the task force, there's one on communications, there's one on the balance sheet, and he's been very vocal about the balance sheet and the use of quantitative easing. He's been very vocal about trying to find data sources that are more micro-oriented data sources and more forward-looking to help the Fed do its projections so that it can have a better sense of where the economy is going. And the last one, of course, we just talked about AI, the labor market. And he has particular views on that. What I was happy to see is that the people he's chosen as leaders of those 5 areas, they really are experts. It's a combination of academics, central bankers, not only U.S. central bankers, but abroad, who have been central banking experience in terms of actually doing monetary policy, and some business leaders. So I think the combination of those people, right, and with the staff help from the Fed, as he said, right, I think we're going to get some very thoughtful results from that. And of course, then the FOMC will have to take up some of those recommendations and debate them among themselves because they are the policymakers.
Recently, the projections based on the markets have changed a fair amount about the likelihood of a rate increase. For example, in July, it really has moved around a lot. You've dealt with this for a long time. Is that typical? Have you seen that before? Is this unusual that the expectations are changing fairly rapidly?
Well, I think the economy has been changing, right? It's hard to read an economy where you had the tariff shock, right? Then we had the Iran war and the oil price shock. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what the trajectory of the economy is going to be. And of course, the on again, off again, Iran war, the ceasefire, right? That adds to sort of uncertainty because oil prices are a significant input into a lot of parts of the economy. So I'm not sure that I would say that it's more volatility than what should be expected given the uncertainty we've been facing in the economy. And then layered on top of that, of course, you have a new Fed chair coming in.
As you say, for several years now, we've had an inflation problem. And one question is, will it solve itself, or do they have to get more restrictive? But from your perspective, do you think that the degree of that problem has changed over the last 6 months, 9 months? Is it a bigger problem today than it was 6 months ago?
I think it's a different problem, right? I think 6 months ago, the focus was on how much of the tariffs were going to feed through to inflation. And remember, there was also some concern on some of the committee members, right, about the labor market. I think the labor market is stabilized, and I think they have a much better view of sort of the low payroll numbers, not necessarily meaning the labor market is weakening appreciably. I think there's recognition now that probably the tariff part of the inflation story is stabilized, right? There's not going to be much more pass through of that. We do have the oil price shock now, which is a new shock. But I think there's more recognition of the accumulation of bad readings in terms of inflation moving in the wrong direction, that I think that's really what's changed the narrative about inflation. I think there's better recognition that even though we're hoping that we're at a point where interest rates are enough to get inflation back down to 2%, that projection may not come to pass. And I think that's what's changed.
Coming up, we go to Pascagoula, Mississippi to see firsthand what it will take for President Trump to get all those ships he needs for his so-called Golden Fleet.
You're listening to Bloomberg Wall Street Week with David Weston from Bloomberg Radio.
With the Bloomberg Small Business Report, I'm Nathan Hager. It used to be a last resort for customers to ask their credit card company for a refund to dispute a transaction. But with so many purchases happening online, chargebacks have become a go-to. and small businesses are getting caught in the middle. Here's Bloomberg Business Week senior writer Amanda Mull.
A lot of, line items on statements are from, a parent company or a processing company or something like that. And you may look at that and go, I didn't buy anything from them.
Which means customers are often disputing purchases they meant to make. But Mull says chargeback requests are growing faster now than credit card purchases themselves, to the point that card companies might not even investigate small ticket disputes. For small business owners, that means they give up a refund plus a fee to the card company for dealing with the chargeback.
That really adds up over time, and can become like a really difficult element in your overall business expenses.
And that is the Bloomberg Small Business Report.
Parents have a lot to get done in a day. Sit tight, hon, I'll be right back. But even when we're rushed, always remember, temperatures as low as 60 degrees can be deadly for children left in the car. Every time you park the car, stop, look, lock. Brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
And I'm Ed Kalengi in the Bloomberg Newsroom. Here are some of the stories we're watching. The U.S. military announced that 2 American service members were killed, 4 were injured, and 1 is missing after an Iranian attack in Jordan following several days of intensifying strikes from both sides. U.S. Central Command said the troops are defending against Iranian ballistic missile and drone attacks on Friday. 4 others were evacuated to Jordanian hospitals. The military said this in a social media post. No further details were provided. It was the deadliest day for U.S. troops since the opening days of the war that started February 28th. The total U.S. death toll now stands at 16. Tehran announced Saturday it would no longer adhere to the terms of the interim peace deal as Iran unleashed heavy attacks on Gulf neighbors in retaliation for the latest U.S. strikes. Kuwait suffered one of its heaviest barrages since the Middle East conflict began in late February, including its airport and an oil facility, triggering multiple rounds of sirens from around dawn on Saturday. Russia and Ukraine also